That's right, folks. We are back, and this is No Soundbites Allowed. I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I am happy to be with you on this Sunday. This is July 11th. It's currently 2:31 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I am here with you to talk about all of the things that matter to you. We are in a live stream around the world expressing our First Amendment rights, even in countries that don't have the First Amendment, to hear what you have to say about the issues that matter. You can reach us on Facebook, Twitter, DLive, YouTube, most social media. We look forward to seeing your chats, or you can call in at 607-242-1582. The phone lines are live. And it looks like the internet overlords are allowing us to be able to speak on all of the platforms today, so we hope and look forward to seeing you. Let's get into it, folks. Let's talk about what's going on, because there's a lot going on. I'm going to start off with something really simple. I don't know how many people have heard about this or seen this. Please do leave your comments. We're looking forward to them whenever you get them available. But we want to mention something. Did anyone see this? There's a viral video that's going around right now. It's about a young boy in America. It was taken on July 8th. It's been reported on Friday, July 9th. I don't know if you heard about this. That there is a viral video. This young boy goes around and he decides he's with this woman right here. And they go on through and the boy just rips out an American flag. Let me show you what this is. This is from on Twitter. Here's the video. Boy comes up and he tried to grab it. Nope. Now he pulls it. He sees it, makes sure it's there, and drops it. Wow. Now, let me ask you, does this look like the America you want it to look like? Is this what we're supposed to expect from America? Is that insulting? Is that not upsetting? Not just for Americans, for everyone in the world. There are people who are dying right now, who are being thrown into gulags in China right now for merely being able to try and be like Americans, to emulate America. We have over 2 million people waiting in line, some of them for 20 years, to become American citizens. We have over 600,000 people at our southern border right now. Over 40,000 children in the last 4 months that have tried to come and enter our nation alone. I mean, talk about child abuse. We're talking about individuals who sent their kids by themselves with sex gangs and drug lords to send them into our desert to hopefully be found so they have a chance to be in a better nation and have a better life. That's how bad it is in some countries, that they think that's the best thing they could do. That form of child abuse. And these are people who love America. And in America, we get to see this instead. We get to see this parent, we believe it's a mother of this child, who comes by and the flag's just there and decides to just toss it, just rip it out and throw it onto the ground. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine being somewhere else in the world and then this is what the response is? This is how people decide that they want to express their national image? And we've been talking about this. This is like with the Olympics, with Gwen Berry, Chloe Wolfe, looking at Megan Rapinoe. This is the impression that people are getting around America, that around the world, that Americans hate America. This is the image that's being promoted by progressives and socialists, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar. They hate our nation. This should be upsetting. And by the way, I want you to comment, and please, we've been with the Biden-Harris administration for 6 months now. 6 months. And in those 6 months, we have seen Gwen Berry, we have seen Megan Rapinoe, we have seen Chloe Wolfe. We are now seeing this child who is deciding that he wants to desecrate the flag, just rip it out and throw it down. This is what America is becoming. please leave comments. I want to hear in the comments and also during this chat, and you're going to see this message up a couple times. Is this what you wanted from the Biden-Harris administration? Is this what you were promised in 2020? In the last 6 months, is this an America that is better? Is that the expression of America that you want to see? I want to hear your comments from anywhere in the world. You tell me, is this what it should be? Is this what America should be about? That we have these kids who are running around and just throwing the flag around, that are insulting America, that are looking forward like Gwen Berry and Chloe Wolfe. They want to go and they want to be activists, athletes. They want to burn the American flag on an international stage. Is this what you want? Is this what you expect from America? And I want to hear this from people over across the seas as well. I want to hear your comments. Tell me, is this what you always imagined America to be? Is this the nation of freedom? That this is the nation that people want to immigrate to? Is that what it is? Because it's a very important question. I really want to hear your comments about this because this is a conversation. And we should have this conversation. Because if this is what America is becoming, what happens next? What's the next thing we're going to see? And you can tell me, well, you think it's great to throw the flag onto the ground and to stomp on it or to burn it, like some of the activists in our sports, like Lebron James. They think it's great. They think it's wonderful. They think America's horrible. LeBron James, as he's promoting China, Megan Rapinoe, as she's dragging the flag on the soccer field. And you know what? What are these people actually looking for? What are they actually promoting out there? They're promoting China. And I want you to understand, what is China really about? Because China, the communists that they want us to be, they want us to be socialists, the Democratic Socialists of America, especially the Ithaca chapter, Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, otherwise known as PLOT, all of these groups, these far left groups, they want us to become socialist. And here's what the socialists do. This is what they want us to become. And as according to the Guardian News on Thursday, July 8th, outrage over the shutdown of the LGBTQ WeChat account in China. Oh, what a surprising thing. The communists don't believe in you being able to express your free speech. They don't believe in you being able to say that you're gay or that you have, well, anything. They want to silence you. Besides the lack of religious freedom, they don't want you to have individual freedom. You don't get to say you're gay. What they said is attempts to access the web WeChat accounts were met with an error message that said that content had been blocked and the account deactivated, quote, after receiving relevant complaints, end quote. Other messages said that the accounts had, quote, violated regulations on the management of accounts offering public information service on the Chinese internet, end quote. This is from Reuters. You know what that sounds a lot like? You know what that reminds me exactly of? Remember last week? Last week, we were talking about Facebook that came up and said, if you have extremist content, we have to help you with that. We have to re-educate you. We have to stop this. Have you been harmed by extremist content? Tell me, what's the difference between Facebook and it saying that there's extremist content and we have to remove that? We have to identify that. We have to re-educate you. And the Chinese government saying, hey, if you're gay, we're just going to block you. We're just going to delete you. How many tens of thousands? Actually, at this point, it's over 1 million accounts on Twitter, over 1 million accounts on Facebook that have been completely eliminated. They got rid of, what was it? Not Rumble. What's that chat service? Not Getter, which is the new one. They just wiped it out. They don't want you to have the conversation. They don't want you to be able to speak. Think about that. And this is what we are becoming. This is why the kids taking the flag, and this is when you have a kid who is being promoted by LeBron James, by Gwen Berry, by Megan Rapinoe. They hate our nation. They can't stand it. We have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the rest of them. They're trying to destroy America. They want us to become a socialist nation. And we have our social media that is promoting the idea that you cannot speak. There is no such thing as freedom of speech. You have to be protected, that you have to be isolated. You have to have the right think so that we could ultimately become just like China, where they're doing the same exact tactics by removing people who are different. They're eliminating people who are different, whether it's the Uyghurs for their religious beliefs or whether or not you happen to be gay. Is that what we want in the world? I mean, tell me, folks, if you think I'm wrong, if you think I've misunderstood, leave your comments. And I really hope that, I see we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter right now. I really hope that you're able to leave comments because you may be censored by YouTube, by Facebook, by Twitter. It's amazing. Actually, Michael Bowie, hello, Michael, says it's an amazing country that tolerates this behavior. It's one of the great things about America. I agree with you that we are a great nation, that you can have a different point of view. And yet we have many people in this nation, the progressives and the socialists predominantly, who are trying to say, if you have a different point of view, you are the problem and you must be punished. And then they turn around, and when we see other nations emulate the United States, or rather, the United States is emulating them, like in China, and when we see China do exactly what Facebook and YouTube and Twitter are doing right now to conservatives, there is an outrage. All of a sudden, the world gets upset. Oh my God, how dare you do what we're doing to conservatives? How dare you do what we're doing to Republicans? How dare you do something that we are doing to people we don't like? Well, that's the problem. See, when you start picking on any one group, then all of a sudden, every group is a target. And eventually, it will come back around and it will target the groups that you were supporting. The reason why China and other nations are able to attack people who are gay or trans or whatever it may be is because they started off with something like we see right now in the United States, where you see YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, the internet overlords are saying, you can't say that you can't have that comment. Just like we were talking about last week when we brought up that Facebook is out there after extremist content, because extremist is a very, very subtle line. It can be anything that you want it to be to target anyone you want. And eventually they will come after you too. And we see that. The more socialist we become, the more they are going to target you. And they're going to come after you. And by the way, this is a conversation, folks. This is a live stream. If you disagree with me, please tell me where I'm wrong. Let's have that conversation. Let's understand how is it that when YouTube is saying there's going to be extremist content, that we're not going to wind up being like Russia. Hello, John. It's good to see you, and thank you for joining us here today. So I want to hear this, folks, because that is also connected to this. Remember last week when we were talking about Christy Alley, and Christy Alley said that people are becoming so, quote, open-minded, end quote, that down the road they will support pedophilia as people, quote, just loving children, end quote. And she said, you think that she's joking. And one of the comments to that was that this is, how dare you say that this is irrational? It's a flawed argument because letting consenting adults express their sexual orientation is an important thing. You have to be open-minded to pedophilia. This is what we hear. This is what is allowed on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. You can be a pedophile. In fact, they want you to be a pedophile. They want to promote that. In fact, they want to promote it so much that people are now fighting, according to, this is the Russia Times, And this is their op-ed, which was on July 6th. And they said on Tuesday, disgusting perverts or just misunderstood. Meet the Zoophiles who have sex with animals and want to be embraced by pride. And when we say pride, we mean gay pride. And in this review, we see that some people in gay pride are saying, no, we don't want to see incest or pedophilia, zoophilia, or super straight. By the way, let me explain. A zoophile, that's someone who wants to have sex with animals. Okay? They want to have, it's bestiality. That's what it is. Let's be honest. And they want to include that as being part of pride because you can't, under this current ideology from the socialists and the progressives, you cannot exclude anything. That's why there's 32 different genders. That's why there is an unlimited number of sexual preferences. That's why you have to refer to some people as Z or Zer or all these other, them, they. You see the profiles on Twitter all the time where people have the way they want to be addressed. This is all part of the same thing. If you can't exclude that, then you can't exclude pedophiles. You can't exclude zoophiles, people wanting to have sex with animals. And yet, what we see here is, and one of the zoophiles stated to the Russian Times, zoophiles are quintessentially queer. But if you think gay pride is a social event that you can be uninvited from, you misunderstand it on a fundamental level. Gay pride is a protest. Pride is about defiance against a society that doesn't want you to exist. Some people may have forgotten that, but I haven't. So people can say things on Twitter like zoophiles aren't welcome at Pride, but they can't stop us from participating. Pride isn't something other people can take away from you unless you let them. Do you see the message? Do you hear the message here? Because this is where the progressive socialist ideology, that's where it's leading us. That's where we're going to. We're going to a point where, through the promotion that they're putting out there, you can't exclude anyone. If you have to refer to someone as Zer, if you have to accept that there's 32 different genders, then you have to accept that there's sexual preferences that include having sex with animals, and that's just the same as having sex with kids, and that's the same thing that Christianity was warning us about last week. That this is where the road goes to. And that is something I think most people really seriously disagree with. I mean, if I'm wrong, please, folks, tell me. Tell me that I misunderstand here. But this is where, and I want you to understand, these are the consequences. And this is being shipped out from the United States to the rest of the world. This is why France is rejecting critical race theory. This is why England is rejecting critical race theory. This is why they're rejecting intersectionality. That's why they're fighting against these things. And some countries are making it a crime to even try and promote these ideas, which I believe was Romania that was doing that. So the reason why is this is a slippery slope. You fall down this slope, and this is where it leads you to. Now, I'm not saying that you can't be gay. I'm not saying don't be bisexual. Have whatever sexual preferences you want as a consenting adult with another consenting adult. That's fine. I don't care. That's your personal life. I'm not involved in it. I don't care. And I don't think most people care. But when you start saying, hey, let's promote pedophilia or incest, then there's a problem. When you say, well, we have to accept people having sex with animals, there's a problem. This is a big deal. I mean, I think it's a big deal. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you think this is perfectly fine. I know some people who believe in Pride Month, they believe in gay pride, they believe in the 32 different genders, they believe in Zer and Z and them, they, and they have these different names. Maybe some of them have a problem with this, but it seems there's a growing movement that says, no, it's all okay. Star Raptor Flock mentions love is the ultimate slippery slope. I think so. Because without it, then why are we worried about the kids who are crossing the southern border who are being co-opted by these slavery gangs? They're a problem. Michael Bowie mentions they're saying essentially there is no right or wrong. And by the way, Star Raptor, thank you for joining us today. And Michael, I agree with you. They're saying there's no right or wrong. You can do anything you want. You can do it to anyone that you want. Well, that's a problem. Because if you're not a consenting adult, if you're not able to give consent, isn't that a problem? Isn't that one of the big things about Me Too? That there is no consent sometimes, and that's a problem? And that children cannot give consent, which is why we protect them, which is why we are against child abuse, except in the case, apparently, under the Biden-Harris administration, of when those kids are sent on a 1,000-mile trek into our desert by themselves. That kind of child abuse is perfectly fine. You can do that if you're from a foreign country. Do that to an American kid in an American state, American citizen, that child, those parents are going to jail. But you do it from another country, whether it's El Salvador, Guatemala, anywhere in the world, it doesn't really matter. If you do that to your child, well, that's okay. That's fine. That's not child abuse. See, and that's the problem. We have these different rules. If you're sending a kid on a 1,000-mile trek without any food, without any money, by themselves with strangers, and you know that those strangers may be part of a drug cartel or may be part of a sex slavery scandal, that's okay. That's okay to do that and break the law and illegal immigration. That's okay. It's okay to have 32 different genders. It's perfectly fine to say that someone needs to be addressed as ze, zer, and them. And there is no real line. And if there isn't a real line, then I have to ask you, how is having sex with animals, how is zoophilia and pedophilia not also on the line? And they're going to tell you that, well, this isn't a big deal because, you can have, it's not always about sex. This same person that was interviewed by Russian Times says people think our relationships with animals are exclusively sexual. He's not saying that they're not sexual, that they're exclusively sexual. Doesn't matter. I don't care if you sometimes have sex with an animal. It doesn't matter. This problem is still the same thing. But like heterosexuality and homosexuality, our relationships are multifaceted. I'm sorry, there is no multifaceted nature to pedophilia or to zoophilia, having sex with animals. It doesn't matter. It's wrong. I think it's wrong. Many people who are in gay pride, they think it's wrong, but yet, according to this article, no, it's not. It's accepted. And it's not welcome, but it is accepted. There's no problem with that. And I have to wonder, where does it end? Where is that line? Michael Bowie mentions that animals cannot give consent either. So how is that behavior okay? Because consent is flexible. According to certain pedophiles, they say that, well, you can get consent from kids. I mean, think about it. We allow kids to have consent at 5 years of age to change their gender. If they can permanently change their bodies through science, and they have the right to make that decision at 5 years of age, then how is that different than a pedophile saying that 5-year-old, not only can they choose their body, they can choose to have sex with that body. That's the road we're on, and it is troubling. Star Raptor says, soon having sex with dead people will be added to the LGBTQ plus alphabet as well. We need LGBTQ plus separatism like we have seen with the LGBT movement. Look, and again, I'm not picking on people who are different. That's not the intent. We're not trying to say, if you're LGBTQ, that's fine. But understand, when you start adding a plus and you just keep adding and adding and adding and saying every single thing is exactly the same, there is no difference and we have to accept it. that you must accept it. Otherwise, you are the problem. You are the problem when you say that a 5-year-old can't decide what their body will be like when they're 30, that they're going to permanently change that body through medicine and surgery so that that 40-year-old is going to be affected by a 5-year-old's decision. And if you say that, then what's the difference in having that 40-year-old have sex with that 5-year-old? What's the difference between someone at 40, whatever, trying to have sex with a farm animal or just a dog, a cat, whatever animal? Do you see the slope here? Do you see the problem with this? It's not really the LGBTQ. It's the fact that it's plus, plus, plus. It's everything else. And that list never ends. That's why people can self-identify as cats. They can self-identify as toasters. I am not making that up. That is not a joke. People do at this time self-identify as toasters. If you can self-identify as they, them, which is not, of course, it's not gendered, it also is not human. You are an it. You are a thing. Now, I'm not picking on them because they have a different sexual preference. I don't care. But when we start dehumanizing individuals and take away their humanity, people start self-identifying as cats and dogs and toasters. And then those people want to have sex with other cats, dogs, toasters, children. This is a problem. I mean, maybe you think I'm wrong. Mavis mentions, considering animals can't give consent. That sounds like a Me Too situation. Well, we would apply that same thought to 5-year-olds. 5-year-olds can't give consent, but according to many in the LGBT community and the trans community, or what the media says is the trans community's point of view, the progressives and socialists out there, they say 5-year-olds can give consent. Think about that. They're saying that 5-year-olds can give consent. So if they can give consent, then what's the point? I think there's a problem there. We've gone too far. You just opened the floodgates and everything is possible. There is no limit. And if there is no limit, there is no law. There is no order. And things fall into chaos and they decay. They fall apart. Because if there is no limit, there is no law, there is no society, and everything falls apart. If you think I'm wrong, that's perfectly fine. I want to hear your comment. Tell me why. If I'm misunderstanding it, if this, again, this is a conversation. One of the few channels on, or one of the few channels in the social media that I want to hear your thoughts. Tell me I'm wrong here. Explain to me how I'm misunderstanding this, because I don't think I am. And I don't think the evidence that we keep getting in social media, in the news, forget social media, in the news, as they report this to us, we are getting told over and over again. Canada has created laws like C-16, C-13. In Canada, you cannot take actions to stop a child, a minor, from becoming, not only becoming trans, taking medicines and changing and altering their bodies forever. You, as a parent of that child, can't speak to that child without that gender. If a kid decides that their name is cat / other, you have to refer to your own child as cat / other. Otherwise, you will be fined in Canada. You could go to jail. It has happened to a father who referred to their son as a son and not as a daughter, and he received a fine. There are fines in Canada right now of up to $20,000 for misgendering somebody, which means, again, that is part of the slippery slope that takes us from this point, and there is no limits, except once you become such a socialist, so once you become this socialist progressive, ultimately, it leads you back to the same point that I brought up before, which is where the communists, once you become that socialist, you become that communist, and then you become China. And China says, oh, you thought you could just do anything? Sorry. No, that isn't how communism works. We're now going to step on you and we will get rid of you. You will just disappear because that's what China does. Let me go back to some of the comments. So, Star Raptor mentions the new LGBTQ flag is a perfect visual representation of this. It went from being a rainbow to looking like puke. It's changed. Nope. One moment. We have a call coming into the program, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed. My name is Michael. Who's speaking?
Hello, this is John, your buddy.
Hey, John. How you doing?
Hanging in there. Arizona heat's killer. You know how it is.
Love to hear from Arizona.
I wanted to touch on something you talked about, which is critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to let your listeners know that even though states are banning it, this is not going to stop. Just because we ban the name critical race theory doesn't mean they are not going to change the name of it and keep pushing it into curriculums. This is a fact.
Well, they use different names. So you have intersectionality, you have gender identity politics, you have critical race theory. They're all the same thing.
The name. Yeah, they changed the name of it. And this is what's so important. I know you have a big audience, Mike, and you have a loyal audience. They should be looking at what their kids are learning from their schools. They need to be observing the curriculum themselves and taking an active role. Because I know I have been talking to many, many parents, especially here in Arizona. Mm-hmm. They don't know what their kids are learning until it's too late.
I know that's happening in New York. Just a month ago, there was a book being read to eight-year-olds, kids in elementary school, in my local community in the Southern Tier, where they were being taught by a teacher this book that promoted racism. It says that young black kids are less than white kids because of white privilege, and that's what white privilege means, and that these black kids are less than white kids, and that you should also hate the police. And parents didn't know about it until they watched the Zoom call. So it's happening in New York, it's happening in Arizona, it's happening across the country.
This is only what we're catching them on, right? This is only the big things we're hearing about. What about the small things they're teaching our kids? You know, this is super important. And I should stress to you and your audience, they need to be looking at the curriculum, and they can request the curriculum to see beforehand, because look, I'm in a purple state. I can only imagine what they're teaching in New York to kids right now, right? Because we don't know. And schools try to block you, even though you have a right to view. If you have a grandchild or you have a child in school, you have a right to see what their curriculum is and what they're teaching your kids. And that's what worries me the most right now about critical race theory. It's not the fact that it's being taught, it's the fact that it's being taught and they're changing it constantly. They're changing the name. So they know that it's not popular across the United States. They know for a fact.
I can tell you right now that I am in discussions with several college professors and in a couple of institutions that they are introducing into our colleges and possibly into our high schools critical race theory. They're not calling it critical race theory. They're just calling it intersectionality. They're calling it institutional racism. They're calling it a lot of different names, but we're talking about math is racist now. You have to have this they, them, zur terminology. Kids are being taught that they have to be able to choose their sexuality. In fact, they are being I would say it's being demanded that kids have to choose their sexuality in elementary school, and they have to then live according to these ever morphing rules of almost anything's possible. That's what I'm seeing. And I'm wondering, are you seeing similar things?
What I'm seeing right now is I'm seeing schools trying to hide this. right? Because you talk about college and high school.
Yes.
Let's go even lower. Let's go elementary school and middle school. What are they teaching your kids? Because, and this comes up with the problem, and as I've been talking, parents need to be looking at their kids' curriculum. They need to be going to their school boards and asking, why is my child learning this? This is a major problem right now. And this is not just our states. This is across the country. Because if they keep changing the name, because they know CRT isn't popular, critical race theory is not popular, it has been shown, you have parents speaking up, they're just going to change the name and they think it's going to die down and they can still continue pushing that agenda. And that's the problem.
That is one of the tricks. That is one of the tricks.
It is one of the common tricks. You're right. And they've done this before. So
remember when they had Acorn? Remember back maybe before your time. There used to be this organization called Acorn that was proven.
Very familiar.
Yeah. And they were proven to be misusing taxpayer funds. They were doing election fraud, literally election fraud. They were caught on that. And so what they did is they changed their name. And now they're just a bunch of different names, all of them on they're progressive organizations. It doesn't stop them. They just change the name.
Exactly. And they think that people aren't going to catch on. But if you really want to battle critical race theory, and I encourage your audience to do this, start requesting those forms. Start going to your schools and asking, what is my child teaching? May I take a look at the curriculum myself? And they should have nothing to hide if they have no fears. They should have nothing to hide, and you have a right to see your child's curriculum.
Well, it would be like saying they should have no reason not to do a recount if they're confident in the vote result. They should they should have no problem saying, here's the curriculum. Here's what we're teaching your kids, because what's the problem? If you know it's right, what's the problem? Why are you afraid of that? If you happen to be governor of New York, why are you worried about an investigation into your sexual assault accusations if you haven't done anything wrong? If you're sure, like the governor of New York, like Governor Whitmer in Michigan, like Governor Newsom in California, if you're sure that your policies on the vaccine and also the isolation that we went through in 2020, if you're so sure it was the right thing to do, then why are you hiding it from the public and lying to the federal agents about your policy that killed 16,000 people in nursing homes? These are all interesting questions. Why is there so much fear about being open and transparent?
Exactly. And as citizens, we have a right to demand to see through FOIA, whether it be through Freedom of Information Acts, going to your school, asking your school board. I think this just shows parents need to take an active role now more than ever to see what their children are learning, because I get it. It can be very hard. I've talked to a lot of parents. Unless you're sitting right there by your kid, and to be honest, probably the reason that this got out, the critical race theory, is because you're sitting at home in a Zoom class and a parent overhears it.
That's the only time parents have heard about it.
Exactly. It's because of the time we're living in right now. And that's a problem, because how long has this been going on? These are questions that I have that need to be answered, and I think the American people deserve an answer to. And this doesn't just apply if you don't have kids. You could be a grandparent, an uncle, anything, if you're worried about that.
Someone in the community, because this stuff affects us. These kids are being taught this. They're going to be voters. They're going to be people working in our jobs. This is going to affect you. And businesses have to create safe spaces. Businesses are going to fire you for misgendering someone by accident without ever knowing it. Those laws are coming. They're in Canada. They're trying to put them into England. France is fighting against it right now. It's going to happen, and we need to talk about it as a nation.
Exactly. And it's against the First Amendment as well. I mean, this is freedom of speech they're going after now.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is a problem. And you've seen people get fired. Like you said, there was the gym teacher who got fired for this, right? For refusing to use gender pronouns. This is happening everywhere. I mean, we as Americans need to do something about it if we want to uphold our constitutional values. But thank you for having me on, Mike. I always appreciate talking to you, and continue the rest of your show, as I expect it's going to be great.
Well, we're going to try, and thank you for calling in and taking the time to speak with us. We appreciate it.
Anytime, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you. That's right, folks. You can call into the program as well at 607-242-1582. As you can tell, the phone lines are live. You can reach us anytime. And you can disagree with this program. I'm not asking everyone to agree with me. If you think I've got something wrong, if I've misunderstood the facts, if the evidence I am showing you from the left-wing major news media, if you think that I'm misrepresenting it or I haven't seen it all, please tell me why. I want to understand these things. And Lacey, by the way, and to get back to some of the comments, Lacey, I did see you there. I love you, Lacey. Thank you for being on the show. Always love to hear from you. Jason from Bing. Hello, Jason. Good to see you on the program as well. The moral stance, he states that the moral stance the left has defined is that white and straight is evil and everything else is a victim. The victim is morally superior, so there are no limits. And that is the problem. That is one of the big problems, is that I consider it, let me say it this way, I consider it to be racist when you are propping up one group, in this case, according to critical race theory, according to intersectionality, gender identity politics, whatever name they want to put on it, you're saying that white people have privilege. And by definition, everyone else is a victim and everyone else is less than. It is a fact. You can't have one without the other. So people, if you're born white, you are born into privilege and you are born as a racist. That is what they are teaching our children right now. That is the critical core of all of that critical race theory, intersectionality, gender identity politics. And therefore, people are inherently evil for being born with a certain skin color, and everyone else is a victim and less than. I fundamentally disagree with that. Absolutely. I have family members who are white, and my family members are wonderful people. I will love them forever because I don't care what color of skin they have, and I will not attest to any kind of ideology that tells me I should hate my brothers and sisters and their children because they have lighter skin than me. That is just, that I think is evil. But when we start saying that, to understand, they're saying this. Oh, what happened to the stream? System just went wonky here. I'm still with you, folks. But it seems I said something that, the internet overlords didn't like that for a moment. The internet overlords seem to have been upset that I said, I love my brothers and sisters, and I don't believe in someone's race defining how I should treat them. The internet overlords apparently did not like that and blasted the system for a second. So, and one of the things we have to understand about when they say this stuff to us, they don't even apply that to themselves. As I was mentioning, as I showed you when John was speaking, what are we seeing with Governor Cuomo? He has 9 sexual assault allegations against him. 9. Me Too does not apply to Governor Cuomo. He has 9 sexual assault against him, and it doesn't matter. We have been proven that he killed 16,000 people in nursing homes because of his policies as an emperor. And the Democrats in the Assembly, in the state Senate, the single party rule of New York allowed this to happen, and they don't care. And Cuomo is in such a good position that according to Democratic strategists, in this case, Hank Scheinkopf, we see that he says that the expectation is that if there were some sort of criminality involved, we would have had a result already of some kind. If they had a political pound of flesh to add, they would have. So Governor Cuomo is safe. He's safe. Even though we know for a fact that he has lied to the federal government, he has lied to the American public and the people in New York, even though he lied, he's okay. Because there's no crime in lying to the public, violating New York Public Officer Law 74, Section H. Look it up if you disagree with me. It's a fact of New York state law. And that's the same thing that we're seeing with Governor Whitmer and with Governor Newsom, where they have killed thousands of Americans through their policies. And it's okay because they're not being held accountable. And as according to Politico, as they mentioned here, all of this raises the possibility that James, the New York AG, James' report, whenever it comes out, if it ever comes out, think of the Moreland Commission, may contain little or nothing new, which might allow last winter's avalanche of bad headlines to just melt away, renewing Cuomo's chances to win the fourth term that was denied to his father, Mario, who served as governor from 1983 to 1984. If there's no criminal act, he's going to be reelected according to the Democratic strategists. Think about that, folks. It doesn't matter that Cuomo is violating Me Too. It doesn't matter that he killed thousands of people through bad policies. It doesn't matter that New York State is in more debt than most nations may have a GDP. Literally. New York State is losing $6 to $8 billion a year. That's more than many countries have as a GDP. And guess what? He's okay. He may get reelected, even with 62% of the population saying, New York State saying that they want to see him out. And that's part of the gender identity politics, the critical race theory. It's because isn't he the example of white privilege, of him being an emperor, not being accountable to even the state government, let alone the people of the state, even as he commits these, or is alleged to have committed these crimes, and yet he's perfectly fine. Because it doesn't apply to him, it only applies to you because you are less than him. You are less than him either because of your color of skin, either because of your gender, or maybe your sexual preference, or maybe it's because of the fact that he is a neo-noble and you are a mere peasant serf with no political power. Maybe. But let me go back to some of the comments here. Michael Bowie had mentioned earlier that he mentioned a joke that he had tried phone sex once but got an ear infection. That's funny. Star Raptor agreed with our caller, John. Lacey mentions that critical race theory also dates back to the Frankfurt School. It's been around for over 100 years under different names. And conservatives need to get involved with local politics. Independents as well. Independents need to be involved as well because this is affecting everyone. Star Raptor mentions that nothing was wrong with the good old-fashioned MLK-style color blindness. It did the job perfectly fine. And Lacey mentions this is extremist content according to Zuckerberg. Well, yeah, and that's why they're blasting this channel, and they try and hold the content back. Please, the answer to that is not only to comment, but also please do subscribe because they're after us. They don't want to have this conversation where you get to say whatever you want. That's your expression of free speech. You can disagree with me. You can tell me I misunderstand. I say this in every episode, every video I do. If you don't agree, let me know why. And you know what? You don't hear the far left saying, oh, I've misunderstood, that the sources from the left are wrong. Garth Ingerick. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, Garth. Hi, I'm from Rochester, where we are circling the drain. Yes, I know. Isn't Rochester Mayor Lovey, who just lost her race, where she had gotten rid of the police and crime went up exponentially? Isn't Rochester where they had riots? I know that some of the members of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow from the Southern Tier had gotten arrested in Rochester on second-degree rioting and had those charges dropped. No wonder. This is the problem, because this is all connected. This is all connected. There are no rules. And there are no rules applied to anyone. You can say anything you want. You can do anything you want. Zoophilia, they're part of Pride Parade, gay pride. They're insisting you can't hold that against them. Pedophiles are saying they're part of the LGBTQ. You can't hold that against them. You can't hold Me Too against Governor Cuomo. You can't hold 16,000 nursing home deaths against Cuomo. You can't hold 4,000 nursing home deaths against Governor Whitmer. You can't hold anything against these people. And if you do, and if they are arrested for a crime, like in Rochester with the rioting that we saw over the summer coming from BLM and Antifa, well, those charges are dropped. In New York City, 3,500 arrests wiped out. They let them go. Let them walk out the door. And for the few people, about 400 people that were arrested in New York City, bail reform let them walk right out the door. They walked right back out the door. And according to Governor Cuomo himself, they turned around and went back out and committed 2.5 more crimes once they were let out on bail reform. And the answer from the progressives and the Democratic Socialists is, that means we have to get rid of the police. According to Representative Cori Bush, we have to get rid of the police. It's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We have to get rid of the police. I know that Press Secretary Jen Psaki, protecting the Biden-Harris administration, has said, oh, no, it's Republicans who did that. No, there isn't. Show me one video, one quote of any conservative, any Republican, any libertarian that has ever said, hey, we have to get rid of the police. Because I'm not aware of it. I've heard it from the progressives, but I haven't. I've heard it from Nancy Pelosi, but I have not heard it from a single Republican. And in each case, every time we are seeing things get worse. So Garth, I went on a little bit of a rant about Rochester because I'm familiar with that. And tell me if I'm wrong. If I've misrepresented any of the information there, please do let me know. And Garth mentions that it was Mayor Lovey of Rochester, her husband, who lives in the same house as her, with their child, who happened to be 11 years old, a girl. Her husband was arrested on drug and weapons charges. And her answer was, oh, I didn't know about that. I just lived in the same house as him. We have a child together. He lives in the house with me, but I didn't know he was running guns and drugs. That's insane. And this is where this separation comes from. When you start hearing Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago say, well, I won't talk to reporters who aren't black. Well, so you're isolating people and you're trying to change the way people are reporting. You don't want to have people talk about it. You don't want to have people talk about the fact that charges are being dropped left and right, that people who have committed arson, who have committed rioting, that have destroyed property, that have threatened people's lives, that's all okay. Because critical race theory, because intersectionality, because gender identity politics. And if you bring it up, you are the problem. Oh, I can't have a gun? No, you're in New York State. You can't have a gun. You're not. No. And when Mayor Lovey's husband is in her house and gets caught with illegal guns, illegal drugs, well, that's okay. That's okay. Because she's a black woman and I can't question her about that and say, you're corrupt. It's very upsetting. Because this is where this all leads, folks. And if you think I'm wrong, I'm more than happy to hear the conversation. Call in, 607-242-1582. Tell me where I'm wrong. If this is new information, if you haven't heard about these things, please do like and subscribe and share this and let other people see this and say, did you know about this? Because we're showing you the evidence. Star Raptor mentions, let's not throw in the towel just yet for 2022 against Cuomo. He has the advantage, however, with next year being an off year with the Dems in power if we go hard enough at it. And Star Raptor, I do want to mention to you, I'm not giving up, but I do want you to know this is what the Democrats in New York State believe. This is what the single party movement in New York State has given us. Besides defunding the police, which has led to an increase in crime, in violent crime, in shootings, we're talking about even versus 2020, where we had nonstop rioting, we see that we are even higher. It's about 40% higher violent crime in New York State. These are the stats from New York State itself. That's why Governor Cuomo decided that he wants to go after your guns and made it a health care crisis. And we are in this disaster emergency because you own a firearm. Not because Antifa and progressive leaders of tomorrow were rioting in Brooklyn, were rioting in Rochester, destroying businesses and restaurants, as we have shown on this program, actual video of this, even though the charges have been dropped on those individuals. No, they're not the problem. The problem is you own a gun, you aren't enough of a progressive, and you are daring to question that Cuomo is going to get reelected, even though he has 9 sexual assault allegations against him, which for other Republicans, other politicians who aren't Democrats, who aren't progressive, they have been removed from office. It was Senator Al Franken. He had 1 allegation of sexual assault against him. He got removed from the Senate. And he was a Democrat. He got removed. Cuomo has 9. And no one cares. No one cares. Or at least New York State Democrats don't care. How dare you bring that up? You're being a racist. You're being a sexist. You're just a Republican, conservative extremist. How dare you bring up those things? Even though there's fact behind it. And I'm trying to go by the same rules that the left, that these socialist progressives are putting against me. And notice I keep mentioning the difference between Democrat and progressive and socialist because they're not the same. I talk to people in every party out there, all of them. And when I speak to Democrats, they don't agree with the pedophilia that we hear about, that the zoophilia that we hear about. They don't agree with Governor Cuomo and what he's done. They don't agree with Newsom and Whitmer and what they have done to kill people, innocent people. They don't agree with these things. And there's good reason for that. And they don't agree with, Mayor Lovey, who gets rid of the police. And therefore, more people there's more rioting, there's more violence, and the public is suffering. Even as the public says, 73% of the public, according to polling, I think that was done by Politico, I believe. I may be wrong on that, or Rasmussen. 73% of the public, including a majority, 60% of blacks, say they want the same or more police, not less. But maybe I'm wrong. Let me go back to some of the comments here because thank you guys. I love your comments. I love hearing from you. So Star Raptor, we haven't lost this race in New York State yet. Democrats think it's all over. They think they've got it wrapped up. And you know what? If people aren't having these conversations, they might well be right. Gareth mentions that Mayor Lovey has election funding issues being investigated, and now have a police accountability board that has a questionable agenda at best. Again, notice how they put these things together. There are no police. They're trying to get rid of all investigations. They're telling you that there are no limits, that whatever you want to do is okay under one of their programs, whether it's LGBTQ+, with the plus being just about anything you can think of. They have it with this gender identity politics, the critical race theory, the intersectionality. It's all okay. And if there's a problem, well, that's on you. Even though the consequences of what they are doing is hurting you. You are the problem. And by the way, because you're a problem, you don't get to have a gun. Oh, by the way, did we mention you're less than others? You're less than the people in charge, so your opinion doesn't count. Because if you are less than, then your opinion is less than, and therefore they can do it. They have to take care of you because you're not capable. You're a woman, you're less than a man, so they have to take care of you. These elites who are aware, they know that you are less than someone else, so they will step in and take care of you. If anyone on the left thinks I am misrepresenting the progressive socialist ideology, that to tell you that the progressives believe certain people are less than other people, which is a racist and repugnant idea. If you think I am misrepresenting that, please leave a comment or call in and let's have that conversation. Because I can prove where the left is saying these things. It is a component, a core component of their ideology, and I will be happy to show you that. And please tell me how I am misunderstanding it. Because if I am, I will apologize publicly and make sure that I promote it. Because that's what we're here for. But I don't believe that's the consequence of their thoughts. And I think the left, the leadership of the left, know that, and they just don't want you to think about it. They don't want you to think. They just want you to do what they tell you to do. Going back to some of the comments here. Hot Chicks. Hey, Hot Chicks, it's so great. I know you're upset. And Hot Chicks is mentioning she's very upset right now. And I understand that. So am I. But we need to speak about this stuff, and we have to bring it up to the public's attention. If we don't have these conversations, then it all gets thrown into the background, and the news media expects us to forget this in 3 months. People like Governor Cuomo and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Cory Bush, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, they expect us to forget everything that's going on so that they can just keep going, because if you forgot about it, don't worry. No, you don't remember? Well, let me sum it up for you. We're the ones who have the right idea. You have a bad idea. We're going to protect you from those bad ideas. Let's take a few more of your rights, and don't worry. Don't think about it. Oh, by the way, here's a free check. Don't worry about the fact that your money's being devalued. Don't worry about inflation that's going to double digits. Don't worry about the fact that energy costs more because we stopped all the pipelines in the United States. And then we took your money and gave it to Russia so that they could build a pipeline. Don't worry about that. Don't think about that. Those things aren't important because we're going to take care of you because you're less than us. And I'm going to prove that in the show. And I'm going to show you the proof. I'm going to show you the proof in just a little bit. Lacey mentions the New Jersey gubernatorial race is this November. A lot of Republicans don't like the GOP candidate, so it looks like New Jersey will re-elect Murphy because of a split vote, which is kind of scary. Because New Jersey's governor is not much better. And didn't he just come out with a new, they're trying to get the red flag law in there. Excuse me, they have the red flag laws in New Jersey because of Governor Murphy. And Governor Murphy, crime is up, and he is. There's more debt in New Jersey. It's falling apart in New Jersey, and yet he's going to get reelected. That's a problem. People have to pick someone who can make a difference, because we see where we are going with this right now, and I think it's going down the drain. Of course, if you think I'm wrong, leave a comment. Tell me how I'm misunderstanding this. Please explain it to us in the comments or call in. Jason from Bing mentions that former Senator Al Franken was a sacrifice so Democrats could target Trump. He was. And we know that's true, that Franken was just a sacrifice because Governor Andrew Cuomo has 9 sexual assaults against him, and he is impervious. In fact, he has CNN, his brother, Chris Cuomo, who's supposedly a reporter, who is advising his brother on how best to make sure that the public does not react to the 9 sexual assaults and the 16,000 people who died that he lied about, that Governor Cuomo lied about, and we know this from his own secretary and his own conversation with Democrats in the assembly and in the legislature. We are being deceived, folks. And I understand why you're upset. I understand it. But it's not enough we have to speak about it. We have to speak up. We have to make sure that social media, even as they try and silence us, that we are here and we get to speak to other people and have these conversations. And you don't have to agree with me, but you do have to, I am asking you, comment, speak. America doesn't get better if we don't at least have a conversation about where America is going. Because they don't want you to think about the consequences. Look at every single politician right now. They will tell you, this is a great law. They won't tell you, and here's the consequence. We were talking about Governor Cuomo. He just created a New York State disaster emergency because you own a firearm, and he is trying to get rid of the Second Amendment. You own a firearm. Firearms are dangerous. That is a healthcare crisis for you. So let's spend $75 million on getting kids summer jobs. I do not kid you. I've already done the video on this. You can go onto the channel and find it. It was this week. I think it was Tuesday, where Governor Cuomo said, since there's such an emergency, there are too many guns in New York State, so we need to give $75 million to kids to go to get a summer job. Are you kidding me? Are you seriously? Is that the answer? We're going to spend money on getting kids summer jobs because that has to do with healthcare, which has to do with Second Amendment. This doesn't connect to me. And if someone knows where this all connects, I don't understand it. And that's why we have people like Mayor Lovey who is saying, hey, let's just defund the police. Just get rid of the police. The problem is the police, not their policies, not the consequences of their policies. And that's the big thing. It's one of the things we talk about on this channel all the time. What's the consequence of what they are doing and what they have done? Joe Biden gets in office. Joe Biden says, you know what? We're going to open up the border, stop building the wall. 600,000 illegal immigrants cross our border. 40,000 children who are being abused, being sent by themselves across our border. Many of these people having COVID. What's the Biden administration's answer? Let's, in the middle of the night, send these kids all across the country, send these people all across the country so you won't see them at the border, and don't let the media actually report on it, block the news media from me being able to show anyone what's going on because they don't want you to see the consequence of their actions. And if you think I'm wrong, I can show you the actual news media coverage. I can show you the Biden administration, Kamala Harris, their conversations about it, because they're telling you, as Kamala Harris said when she went to the border, actually, she went to El Paso, not the border, and said, things are great. It's great. We're doing a great job. Because 600,000 people showed up in 4 months because Biden got in and opened up the border. It's crazy, folks. We have to look at the consequences. And when we look at these consequences, it's up to you. Make whatever choice you want. I'm not telling you to vote Republican or conservative or libertarian. I'm not telling you to vote any way. But I want you to understand what is it that are the consequences of these people being in and their policies. We have them in our schools, and they are telling their school boards are making sure that our kids are being taught racism. That if you are not white, you don't have privilege and you are less than another person because of the color of your skin. Doesn't matter if you're smart, doesn't matter if you're a genius, you are less than others. That's what they are teaching our kids in schools right now. And our athletes are backing that up by saying, I need to go. Chelsea Wolfe says, I need to go to the Olympics so I can burn the American flag. Gwen Berry says she wants to go to the Olympics so she can be an activist athlete and denounce America. This is what our kids are being taught. At the same time that they are being taught Me Too against certain people, only certain people, not other people. And by the way, you're responsible for deciding whether you're a boy or a girl at 5 years old, and it's something that's going to impact your life for the rest of your life, whether you're right or wrong. This is what we're teaching. Tell me that this is not dark, dangerous stuff. If you think I am wrong, I don't know how many times I have to say. Please tell me why. I want to hear it. The world wants to hear it. DJ Jesse has joined us, and hey, Jesse, good to see you here with us. I haven't forgotten about you. Hot Chicks mentions the governor cannot sexually assault you if you have a gun. And that's why I think women should be more involved in the Second Amendment. I promote, be armed, get training, protect yourself. And I think it's one of the biggest things. Second Amendment's there to protect women, to protect children. But then we have people like Representative Cheryl Jackson Lee, who wants to make it impossible for women to protect themselves. She doesn't want you as a woman to have a gun. She has an armed security. Maxine Waters has armed security. What's her name? Speaker Pelosi has armed security. But you don't deserve armed security. You don't get to have a gun because, who cares? It's terrifying. But I agree with you, Hot Chicks. Women should be armed and they should have training on firearms. And I have recommended it to all the women that I know in my life. And I think it's a good thing because I disagree with Representative Cheryl Jackson Lee. I disagree with Speaker Pelosi, AOC, all of them. I disagree on their destruction of the Second Amendment. Garth says, sorry, all they wanted was more money. Well, money goes with power. Money goes with position. And we see that these people are making more and more and more money. Matter of fact, it's Megan Rapinoe of the U.S. women's soccer team. She sued United States Soccer, to get more money. Even though, as it was found out, as judges and lawyers and everyone looked through the numbers, Megan Rapinoe makes more money than the men's team. She's getting a better package deal. She gets more money, and she turned down the very deal she's asking to get compensated for. She could have got paid based on her success. She didn't want that. But she's getting paid more money than men, and she still sued to get even more money because she wants the attention. And then she gets hired by Victoria's Secrets to be a model, even though she's very far from a model, and no one seems to really like her, except the people who are socialists who love her. Of course, socialists don't buy any of the products. They don't go to support women's soccer. They don't do anything except complain. They want you to be different, but they don't want to be bothered with it. I'm telling you, folks, you have to get involved. That's both in comments here as well as going out and voting. Vote for whomever you want. Just understand the consequences. I'm not telling you that Republicans are angels. I'm not telling you that libertarians are your savior. I'm telling you, understand the consequences, and there are degrees of problems here. And if we're not trying to address any of them, it just gets worse. I'm being honest with you with the consequences that I am seeing. If you see different consequences, please tell me. I am hopeful that I am wrong. I want someone to explain to me, Mike, you just don't get the big picture. You're missing it. Please, please. If I'm missing it, I want to know because it would make my day much happier than what I go through right now. Jason mentioned summer jobs at an inflated minimum wage. They are not worth the wage. They will not find a job. Jason's speaking about Governor Cuomo saying the answer to violent crime, the answer to homicides and mass gun shootings that are happening in New York State as well as around the country is, well, we give kids a summer job, except he forgets to mention that, well, due to the lockdowns, 30% of all businesses in New York closed forever. That's some upwards of another 40% of jobs since January have closed forever because he increased the minimum wage, because he has limitations on how many people can go out to businesses, and he's destroyed it. So these jobs don't exist for these kids, and businesses that are still trying to get back to normal. They can't even afford the workers they have right now, according to the small businesses in New York State and around the country. They can't afford the employees they have now, and you want them to go and hire new kids at even more money than the people who are already working there that they can't afford at the moment. What do you think the consequence of that is? Because I can tell you, it's going to be $75 million of taxpayer money that is debt in New York State. That means higher taxes in New York State. The kids aren't going to get jobs. The businesses aren't going to improve. And you're going to see gun violence continue because this has nothing to do with gun violence, which is mostly from gangs and drugs. Especially because we still have less police. And the answer is we have less police, which means it takes them longer to get to each and every event, each shooting, each robbery. It's going to take them longer because there's fewer of them, which means that the gangs and the drug addicts who are causing these problems are incentivized to actually go out and do more of them because there's no one there to stop them. And if they do get caught, they're going to be released on bail, so then go back out and do it again. It was only a year ago that there was this one case reported by the New York Post, a gentleman who had been arrested for robbing a bank and in New York State, and we released him because of bail reform, and he turned around and the same day robbed another bank and got arrested for it as well. This is what they want you to forget about. Because these are the consequences. Saying you're going to give kids a summer job that doesn't exist in an economy that is falling apart with businesses closing more than they are opening is not a solution. It's a way to distract you from the fact that we have businesses that are failing because of economic policies that were horrible, and we are destroying the ability of Americans to defend themselves and the police to exist, which is encouraging these problems. But they don't want you to think about that. Lacey mentions that democracy dies in darkness, according to the Washington Post, and we are. Garth mentions that all the national stuff in the Middle East is going to get more unstable. These are great smokescreens, and I do want to talk about, and I have been. And we're one of the few channels that since January 22nd, we have been talking about the failure of the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, let's stand corrected, has been doing in the Middle East. And we're about to tell you about what's happening with Afghanistan, which is the biggest signal to the rest of the world that America's foreign policy doesn't exist and that we are weaklings. We are weak and we have failed, and everyone's going to beat up on us going forward. If you think international policy was bad before, if you thought the world was unstable and violent before, if you thought there was global terror in the world before, wait for it. It's about to get worse because of what just happened in Afghanistan. I'm going to get to that in just a second. I will show you the proof from around the world, and mostly from the left-leaning news media, to prove that our international policy has failed and the world is about to get a lot more violent. I will show you the proof. Jesse mentions that he's blocked on Facebook. I'm probably blocked on Facebook at this point, or if not, I guarantee you people are going to be getting messages from Facebook that are going to be saying, hey, you've been exposed to an extremist. Because someone is saying, here's the consequences of what's happening. Here's the guy who's showing you the left-leaning media as they tell you how bad things are. I'm sure I'm blocked too. If not, I will be. Garth mentions that who in their right mind would want to be a police officer? You know, I don't know who does. And my hat's off to them. I support the police. I believe in backing the blue. And it's a horrible job right now. It really is. Because it's so difficult. But let me move. I want to get to Texas. Because Texas has got a problem as well. And this is a big thing to explain. In Texas, Texans, there's this new story. You may have seen this in the news, and I'm sure you're going to hear about this from the left media. Oh my God, voting rights. The Republicans are so bad. The GOP is so bad with voting rights, they won't even let you tell them how bad it is. They know it's evil and wrong. So the Republicans won't even let people complain about the voting rights. You're going to hear that, and you are hearing that. And they're going to point to Texas. Just today, the news came out this is from the Texas Tribune. Texans testifying on GOP voting bill faced a 17-hour wait to be heard by lawmakers in the dead of night. Oh, how evil. The GOP, they're making people wait 17 hours because they know they're wrong. That's what you're going to hear from the major news media. That's what they're going to tell you. You know what's the part they're going to leave out? That one, the Senate, individuals who went to Texas State Senate, if you went there to talk about what you thought of the Voting Rights Act, you were heard. They started at 11 a.m. People were heard almost immediately. But if you happen to be part of the 400 people who were organized by the far left to show up, kind of like unions, kind of like the Antifa and Plot, Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, Citizen Action. If you were in those groups and you were told, show up here, make a complaint, and you went there, and if you went to the House, Texas House of Representatives, and people started showing up at 5:30 in the morning, even though they didn't start until 8 a.m. So there's already 2.5 hours there. You're there for no reason other than being a line, because they weren't even possible to speak to them. And in this reporting, what we did find out is, and here's the part of this, there were questions. Lawmakers, first of all, they had to deal with, they were speaking for a couple of hours because it was on their schedule to talk about the bail registration, to become more like New York or not, to have the same kind of bail reform, releasing criminals back into the public to commit more crime. That's what they were talking about at first. That's normal. And so they didn't even get to talking about the voting rights bill until 5:30 p.m. That's not the fault of the lawmakers. That's the system. And so if you showed up at 8 a.m., there was no reason for it. But then the Democrats spent most of their time talking about the Republican who put in the voting rights bill in Texas for hours. Democrats on the committee, for whom the committee hearing presented the only opportunity to ask questions of Mr. Murr at length, and so the time was limited. They spent hours, 4 hours, 9:30. The Democrats wasted the time of the public knowing they had a line of people there from 8 a.m. And they wasted 4 hours to complain about the guy who put in the voting rights bill rather than letting the people actually speak. Their own people speak. Democrats knew they had organized 400 people to show up at 8 a.m. And rather than immediately letting those people speak at, say, 5:30, when the bill actually came up and they knew they weren't going to need those people at 8 a.m., they had them show up at 8 a.m., they had them waiting until 5:30, then they may wait them another 4 hours so that the Democrats can complain about how evil the GOP is before they let any of those people speak. And you know why they did all that? Because they knew the news media will put up the very headline you saw, the very headline they don't expect anyone to read the story. They wanted the headline, Democrats wait 17 hours because GOP is evil. That's the headline they wanted you to hear. They didn't want you to think about the story. And think about everything we are talking about. They know you're not reading the story. If you read in there, you'll see the Democrats organized and sent 400 people to this event at 8 a.m., knowing fully well that there was no way that they were going to speak before the afternoon. And then they made those people wait 4 hours as they complained about useless information that had nothing to do with the bill, because they knew that they had a headline coming from the news media saying, oh, the Democrats are waiting forever. If you're a Democrat and you want to complain about the voting rights, the evil GOP won't let you speak, even though it's the Democrats that did it themselves. No one needed to show up before 12 o'clock. No one needed to show up before 12 o'clock. The Democrats knew that. And they knew that they were going to complain for a couple of hours. They didn't need people there immediately. They didn't need them waiting all day long. They wouldn't have had people waiting until the middle of the night if it wasn't for the Democrats wasting time so that they could get a juicy headline. Let me ask you, do you think that's fair? Do you think that's good politics? We're going to use our very supporters to get a headline to make the other guys look bad because we don't have an argument of substance. We just want them to look evil. And we know, and we're counting on the American public to not pay attention. They're going to read a headline on Twitter, and then they're going to say, well, the GOP must be evil. 17 hours. How dare they? Why are Republicans afraid of letting the people speak? No, they weren't afraid to let the people speak. They did let the people speak. The Democrats wasted those people's time, and they knew they were going to waste their time. They planned it. Jason mentions they were waiting for a photocopy. I love that you mentioned that because I did want to bring that up. The photocopy, which is coming from Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, by the way, does not think that you are smart enough to be able to get a photocopy of your voter ID card. You think I'm kidding? You think I'm wrong? Here it is. Yahoo News. Harris lambasted for a remark on rural voters' ability to cast ballots. She said, quote, and this is from Friday, July 8th. She said, I don't think that we should underestimate what that could mean because in some people's mind, that means, well, you're going to have to Xerox or photocopy your ID to send it in to prove that of who you are. She's saying this to BET. There are a whole lot of people, especially people who live in rural communities, who don't. There's no Kinkos, there's no Office Max near them. People have to understand that when we are talking about voter ID laws, to be clear about who you have in mind and what would be required of them to prove who they are. Of course, people have to prove who they are, but not in a way that makes it almost impossible for them to prove who you are. So think about it. In Texas, the Democratic Party are saying, we're going to make these people wait 17 hours because we'll get a good headline, because we know it's going to work out for us. And at the same time, we have Kamala Harris, who's jumping out there and saying, talking about, again, same thing, voting rights and getting voter information so that you can verify who you are. She's saying, and not only are people so stupid, these Democratic supporters are so stupid to wait 17 hours being used to be able, must wait 17 hours to make a complaint. But you have Kamala Harris saying they're too stupid to be able to make a Xerox copy, that you can't make a photocopy. And by the way, she is saying this specifically to people on BET, Black Entertainment Television. She's talking about black people. If you are black, you don't know how to get a photocopy. You don't know how to make a copy of your ID. The very same ID they don't think you can afford to get, even though it is free in many states. You're just not smart enough. It is almost impossible for them. She's talking to BET, and she said rural people. So if you are black in a rural community, you don't know how to get an ID card. That's Kamala Harris saying that. I know you would think that that was Joe Biden, who says that not everybody in the Hispanic and black communities know how to get online. This is from the Washington Times. This is from February 17th of 2021, when Joe Biden at a town hall said a lot of people don't know how to register. Not everybody in the community, he's speaking specifically of blacks and Hispanics, not everybody in the community, in the Hispanic and African American community, particularly in rural areas, again, rural areas that are distant and or inner city districts, know how to get online to determine how to get in line for vaccinations. You're just not smart enough. If you're black and Hispanic, you don't know how to use the internet. You don't know how to get on a line, and you don't know how to get a photocopy of your ID. You are just dumb. This is coming from Kamala Harris on July 10th. This is coming from Joe Biden on February 17th. These are direct quotes from the left-leaning media. And they are speaking specifically to and about Hispanics and blacks. I've just gone over the quote. Tell me how I am misunderstanding them. If you're on the left, tell me how I am wrong in understanding the very quote of what they said. It gets worse. Here it is from Politico. And I'm going to get to the comments in 1 second, folks. This is from Politico on July 11th. Yes, today, just reported. Kamala Harris is facing scrutiny over the first 6 months of her being in office. And we want you to understand, they're talking about the fact that it is a S show in the with Kamala Harris and the Joe Biden administration. They're having big problems. There are harsh dismissals. People and ideas are being completely ignored. They're not talking to each other, even though they are copying each other in their comments about rural voters. They hate rural voters because they've said that. They think that if you're black and if you're in a rural community, you're an idiot because you can't get a photocopy because you don't know how to go online. And this goes back to, we knew that Kamala Harris was going to say this because she was saying things like this back in 2019, August 1st, 2019. We're talking about the 2020 Democratic nomination in July.
She also brings up the fact that her background is political activism, protesting. And she's so, maybe because she was born into this environment where she's dealing with nothing but adults who are protesting, she doesn't realize we won. You are a United States senator. That's what they were protesting for, the ability for you as a woman and a person of color to be able to be a senator and to be a candidate for the United States presidency, something that was unheard of in the generations before. You won. And now you're still protesting and you're still saying, well, it's still unfair. Why is it unfair? You won. Because of the very fact of the success that you have had, you won. Why is it unfair? Why is it still something that's a problem? I don't understand it.
So, and we said it right there. And that ultimately, I think, is the problem, is they won. Progressives, socialists, they won a long time ago when the rest of America joined them and said, hey, let's have a civil rights movement. Let's change things because it's unfair, because it was lopsided, because it was racist. And you know what? We did change it. And we didn't need critical race theory. We didn't need intersectionality. We didn't need to teach our kids about gender and identity politics and make them decide at 5 years old whether or not they want to permanently change their bodies forever, as they are being taught that if you aren't the right color, you are less than a human being. We didn't need any of that. And we got it. And we made the changes. And the changes were so impressive, so effective that someone, if you were growing up in the 70s, you didn't think it was possible for someone to be black or a woman and run for president, let alone even win. That wasn't impossible. And here it is in that same lifetime, because I was born 68. In my lifetime, we went from they couldn't possibly even run to the fact that President Obama was elected and then reelected. And we have Kamala Harris as winning in a race as well. As besides being a senator already, besides the fact that over 16% of the Congress is held by people of color. 23% are women of color, women and or people of color in our Congress right now. We're talking about numbers that they love to go by these percentages. We're talking about better than the national average. There's only 13% of the nation that's black. 16% of Congress is black. Because they're so busy protesting. They're not thinking about the consequences of what they are doing. They're not thinking about what's happening in our nation. They're not worried about the impact. They're worried about a protest because that gets them power. It gets them money. They're so busy trying to have a fight about something they already won. We are a good nation. We have women in power. We have blacks in power. Could there be more? Maybe, maybe not. But you know what? You don't have to protest to get them. All you have to do is go out and vote. Have these people run and vote. Because it's already been done. The fight was already won. But they're still busy telling you, it's not fair. We still have to fight. Because 5-year-olds don't have the right to choose their body for the rest of their lives. We have to keep fighting because not everyone agrees that if you're not white, you are inferior, that you are lesser. Because that's the way it's supposed to be. Tell me, folks, do you think I'm wrong? I'm asking everyone here, do you think I'm wrong? Because I know that we've seen Facebook already block me. We saw the internet overlords try and block the channel for a second there. They want to reduce this. They want to make it hard for you to see this. They don't want you to be able to comment on this. I believe in the First Amendment. And I'm asking people around the world, tell me if you think I'm wrong. Am I misunderstanding it? Am I reading the quotes wrong? Because I'm putting it in context for you. I'm giving you the entire quote. I want you to see the entire quote. I'm giving you the entire quote. This is exactly what she said in context. There's no way to misunderstand it. And I'm showing you the source where it's coming from, which is from the left. I'm showing you the sources and what they have said and the quotes from CNN, their town hall. It's coming from Kamala Harris, reported on Yahoo News. Here's the full context and the organization she's talking to. I am not misrepresenting what they're saying. I don't need to misrepresent them because what they are saying is insane. And when you read it, it doesn't have to, I don't have to make up stuff about this. I don't have to misrepresent it. It's obvious. And it's not new. It's not new, folks, because we saw Business Insider on February 13th, 2020, tell us Joe Biden told a group of black mayors in 2019 that an issue in their communities is parents who can't read or write. This is Joe Biden, reported by the New York Times. New York Times. New York Times. Joe Biden, talking to South Carolina black voters, tells them that blacks don't know how to read, that black people don't know how to read, they don't know how to write, and this is a problem for them. This is the New York Times saying this, not me. They're quoting Joe Biden in 2019, not 40 years ago when he instituted the crack laws to put black people in jail. No, I'm not quoting that. I'm quoting what they were talking about in 2019, that he didn't think black people could read or write. Are you surprised in any way that he also doesn't think that black people or Hispanics know how to get online? What you might be surprised is that Kamala Harris doesn't think black people are any smarter because he doesn't think that they can get photocopies. This is what these people think of you, especially if you happen to be in a rural community, but most absolutely if you happen to be black or Hispanic, then you are an idiot. Because you are lesser. They believe in the fact that you are less than. That's why they believe in white privilege, because you aren't equal. You are less than. And they are the elites, the neo-nobles, that are going to protect you. You are going to serve them like the serf peasant that you are, and you're going to do what they say. They don't want you to read anything. God forbid you actually read an article and figured out that they are using you. And instead, you're going to read the headline that says it's 17 hours oh my God, I need Kamala Harris. I need Joe Biden. I need the progressives to protect me, even though they are using you, as the evidence is there in the news media. It's just not up front. It's buried in the story, so you don't read that far. And they are using you because they are absolutely sure that you are not going to actually be able to read. You're not going to be able to get photocopies. You can't get in IDs. You can't do anything without them. This is about power. Jesse mentions Jesus Christ Almighty. It sounds racist and it's unfair. And I agree. Garth mentions Biden was the jelly covering the aspirin that is Harris on the teaspoon from grandma or the elites. And I agree. This is horrible. I know Lacey mentions that according to Harris, Lacey is considered uneducated because she's from a rural area. Yes, and that's the inspiration for young women. That's right. This is how inspirational they're trying to be for young women. Young women, if you are out there, if you're black and you're from, or Hispanic, and you're in a rural area across America, around the world, please tell me, do you feel inspired right now? If you happen to be in Canada, in the United Kingdom, if you're in Germany, if you're in France, if you're in Peru, anywhere in the world, let me ask you, how much do you think, or how do you think that Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, the progressive Democrats, the socialist Democrats, how much do you think they value you? Do you think, if they think that their own people, blacks and Hispanics in America, if they think they can't read, that they can't go online to register to vote, that they can't go online to find out where vaccinations, that they're not smart enough, it is almost impossible, according to Kamala Harris, for someone black and Hispanic in a rural community to be able to get a photocopy, then how bad is it? How little do they think of those who are in Canada, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, God help us, Peru, South and Central America, the east of the world? How dumb do they think you are? How little do they value your life? On top of the fact that we know they don't value your life, because critical race theory and intersectionality tell us that you are not worth what everyone else is. You don't have privilege. You are less than. They have already explicitly told you that. So think of how little they think of you. And you're going to tell me, well, Mike, you are just misunderstanding that they do not think like that. They don't have such a petty view of the rest of the world, of people of color in the rest of the world. You're just making that up. That's just not true. Okay. You know what? Here it is. Because I told you last week, on July 6th, which was last Tuesday, we saw that under the Biden administration, in the middle of the night on July 2nd, Bagram airfield and this is in Afghanistan, where the United States has been for 20 years. We, as part of his April declaration, April 2021, he said, we're getting out of Afghanistan. So in the middle of the night, without anyone being told, including Afghanistan military and their politicians, no one was told, Biden said to the military, take all of our stuff, let's get out of there. We are just leaving. To quote from the movie Aliens, we are leaving. And they left. They walked out and left behind tanks. They left behind small arms and ammunition and food that was taken by the Taliban. And we told you this is an example of the absolute lack of foreign policy and lack of understanding of consequences of the Biden-Harris administration. 2 days later, the White House, Joe Biden comes out and he says that, speaking about He doesn't mention the fact that over the July 4th weekend that we ran away from Afghanistan, that we ran with our tail between our legs and left everything for the Taliban in Afghanistan, that we ran so fast we couldn't take our tanks. We didn't even disable the tanks. Literally, there's video from the Sun International News that is showing the Taliban riding around in brand new American tanks because Joe Biden ran away that fast. And so his answer on July 8th, he's decided to say on July 8th, Thursday, he wanted to explain why this was such a great idea. And he says in there, and thanks to the way in which we have managed our withdrawal, no one U.S. forces or any other forces have been lost. Conducting our drawdown differently would have certainly come with an increased risk of safety to our personnel. Think about this. Yeah, instead of taking our time to get out of that nation, Joe Biden said, we are out of Dodge. We are gone. We are leaving right now. And they left the keys to tanks, to weapons, firearms, military grade weapons and food for the Taliban. We left them there. This is their plan. This is how much they think of the Middle East. And if you think that you misunderstood this, that, this is maybe a bad idea, let me explain. And then I'm going to get to the comments. So hang on, Jesse. I see you, Garth and Lacey, everybody. I see you there. Hang on. They say this is what, and they want to make sure we understood exactly what Biden and Harris are talking about here. And this is Jen Psaki, the press secretary of the White House, on July 9th, answering comments and questions about what we just did over the weekend, giving up Bagram Airport, giving food and weapons to the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in the Middle East. This is what she had to say.
Yesterday, the president said that he actually denied that the intelligence community had assessed that the Afghan government had collapsed. That conflicts with the reporting of the Journal and other news outlets that said that it collapsed within 6 months. Was he not briefed on that intelligence, or are you denying that that intelligence exists?
Okay, so I want to put this in perspective. Joe Biden said, and you can see it in the White House response here as he was taking questions, that, and I will have links for everything I'm showing you in the comments. So after the show, you can see this and read it for yourself. Joe Biden said, no, even though the world intelligence agencies and groups like me are saying there is no good policy for foreign policy, there is no plan here, and that this is actually going to destabilize the Middle East, it's going to destabilize the world, and the Taliban, which we have beaten and beat down, are going to resurge, and Al-Qaeda is coming back, and ISIS is coming back, which will ultimately mean American lives will be in danger. Israeli lives, our only allies in the Middle East, will be in danger. He said, nope, you just don't understand, you're wrong. This is, and so the news media, the press, Politico, is saying, hey, is that right? Joe Biden said, we don't know what we're talking about. Everyone else is wrong. That everyone in the world is wrong, and he's the only one who understands it. This is the response from the White House.
Well, first I would say that we, of course, abide by the intelligence presented by our own intelligence community. But the way the question was answered and in part presented was whether it was inevitable. And the president does not believe that it is inevitable. The intelligence community has never said it was inevitable for the Taliban to take over the country. And so his objective, or his what he was trying to convey, was that there's a responsibility, and the responsibility now lies in the hands of the Afghans. We have trained over 300,000. We've provided $3.9 billion in humanitarian assistance. These are brave fighters who have fought off, taken on casualties, and fought off over the course of the last several years. We want to equip and empower them, and it is now in their hands. But it is not inevitable, nor has any intelligence assessment predicted it was inevitable.
Okay, I want to be very clear here. So they just said, no, see, Nobody said it's inevitable. No one's saying that that we just gave up the Middle East, that we have no Middle East policy, that we have not considered any of the consequences of our actions, and more importantly, the way that we are doing it. That no one is complaining about the fact that we just gave up an airport filled with guns and weapons and tanks and trucks and food, that this is not going to have any impact whatsoever on the Middle East. And here comes the answer on July 9th from the Taliban itself.
If you're suffering from cataracts, diabetic retinopathy, macular degeneration, glaucoma.
There it goes. Here it goes. This is the Taliban itself. Here's their answer to Joe Biden and to Jen Psaki.
و به تمام جهانیا هویدا است که 85% خاک فی‌الحال زیر تسلط امارت اسلامی افغانستان آماده. مجد
That's, he just said, 85%. 85% of Afghanistan is controlled by the Taliban, by Al-Qaeda, ISIS, by the very same people who created a 20-year war, the very same people who killed American soldiers and citizens. Forget about soldiers. They were killing citizens. They were killing reporters. These are the guys who were beheading people around the world. These are the people who are promoting global terror because you think differently, because you might be a woman who wants to go to school. That's what the Taliban is fighting against. Because you might be gay. That's what the Taliban is fighting against. Because you don't believe the religion they believe, and you don't believe it the way that they believe it. That's what the Taliban, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda are fighting for. And they have 85% of Afghanistan, and they just got a bunch of tanks and a bunch of food and a bunch of weapons from Joe Biden for free. He just gave it away. But you know what? But that doesn't mean that the Taliban is going to go and take over. It doesn't mean ISIS is going to take over. It doesn't mean that we're going to see Al-Qaeda resurge and that these guys who are more than willing to go around the world and attack innocent civilians, not just military, innocent civilians, that those guys, well, they're just not going to be a problem. They're no longer a problem. That's not an issue. How silly of you. By the way, they're not getting any funding from Iran. Don't think about Iran, who is funding the global terror, who Joe Biden is he's trying to figure out a way to give Iran billions of dollars, just like he did when he was vice president under President Obama, and we gave them $450 billion. And John Kerry told us when we did it that was going to fund global terror, and it did. And the Biden administration, learning that lesson, that he gave $450 billion to Iran, and global terror around the world went up. So Biden, being smart, having been in politics for 47 years, because he has such a big impression of people with different colors, people of color around the world, he's so intensely and so absolutely concerned about them, he went to Hamas in Palestine and gave them $75 million so that Hamas could turn around, buy 4,000 rockets, and bomb women and children in Israel for 11 days. That's what Biden did. That's how much he really is concerned about people of color around the world. That's how much of a plan he has for the Middle East. And he thinks there's zero consequence when those very same people have been given an air base filled with tanks, filled with food, filled with guns and ammo. And he thinks it's going to be perfectly fine. And there's no problem. And to quote him on this, I want to go back to this. I want to quote him on this. He says, well, you know what? Conducting the drawdown differently would have certainly come with an increased risk. These risks were, it's unacceptable to do this any other way. He says, the U.S. military mission in Afghanistan continues through the end of August. We retain personnel and capacities in the country, and we maintain some authority under which we've been operating. We have so much authority that we are running away with our tail between our legs. We have so much authority that the Taliban has 85% control, and he thinks there's absolutely no consequence whatsoever. Folks, if you think I'm wrong, if you think I misunderstand, if you think I am providing you the sources from the White House, from Yahoo News, from The Guardian, from the White House itself, if you think I'm misunderstanding this, this isn't right-wing politics I'm quoting here. I'm quoting the left. And all I'm asking you to do is think about this and understand the consequences. And tell me if you have someone who is willing to kill women and children for the audacity of getting an education, if they're willing to kill people because they won't believe something that the Taliban wants them to believe, if they're that evil, and that is evil, they are global terrorists, and you think, and you want to believe, tell me, please explain to me how you think giving them tanks and trucks and food and an air base for free, just walk away and leave it there, you mean to tell me you think that doesn't have any impact whatsoever? And we hear Joe Biden and Kamala Harris tell us, well, we're progressives. We love people of color. We love women. That's why we support gender equality. We support the identity politics and the intersectionality and critical race theory. They love those women and children in Afghanistan, in the Middle East, and everyone who's going to be affected by global terror so much that they gave weapons to the bad guys. And they're trying to figure out a way to give money to the bad guys. Folks, tell me if you think I'm wrong. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. Matter of fact, let me go back to the comments because I've not spoken to them. So I want to make sure. Because I want to hear what you think about this. Tell me if I'm getting it wrong. And of course, you can always call into the show at 607-242-1582. Garth mentions that Trump tried to take them out, but they were made to stay disobeying his directions. And there were many questions about, and we saw a lot of reporting of generals that were fighting with Trump. We do know that. Some of them being including General Milley, who decides that he believes in critical race theory, and he thinks that the biggest threat to the United States, according to General Milley, is white rage, not funding global terror overseas. And this is why it's a big deal to me. Because if you're willing to fund global terror overseas, they will make it to the United States. They will kill Americans overseas and in the United States. We've seen it happen. We were told by John Kerry himself, when he was Secretary of State under Obama, that absolutely was going to happen, and it did happen. So when I am very concerned about what happens in the Middle East because it kills Americans. We've seen that happen. That is a fact. So that's a problem when we have generals like General Milley who's saying, hey, no, it's all about right rage. Don't worry about the consequences of giving the bad guys guns and weapons and ammo and an air base. That's not important. What's really important is white rage. Okay. Going on, Garth mentions that didn't we leave equipment in Iraq with Obama as well? And the answer to that is yes, we did. And many of them went into Syria, and Syria became even worse of a situation where we happened to increase our troops. So yes, Garth, the answer is yes, that's true. Garth also goes on to say, it funded Chinese scientists to help with the nuke programs. That's the funding given to Iran under the Iran nuclear deal. And yes, it did. Again, this is from, you can go to the New York Times and you can see the articles on it. And John Kerry having said that, and I've done videos on that as well. Patrick's time. Hello, Patrick. It's good to see you. I've not seen you on the program before. Thank you for joining us. Patrick says, Biden is illegitimate and that there's no chance Biden got millions more votes than Obama. According to what we are being told, he did. He got more votes. He got the most votes ever. And don't you dare ask for a recount. Don't you dare look it over. Even though we see Arizona has done a recount, and that recount is being delayed because they went out of session, because no one wants to report on that. And even less reported is the fact that Pennsylvania has just agreed to do a recount. Because we see the progressives and the socialists are so confident in the voting, in the process, in what happened, even as we've seen courts reverse many of the things they changed illegally. That is a fact. Fact checkers on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, you can check me all you want. That is a fact. They are so confident that they do not want anyone to do a recount, which is all the American people are asking for. Do a recount so we can have confidence in our elections, because it seems very strange what happened there. And that Obama seemed to be a hell of a lot more popular than Joe Biden, who has run for president before and lost, who spent 47 years in Congress and has always been a racist and only gotten worse over time. I don't know, but maybe it's me. But when we have a man who's in office who is directly telling people that blacks and Hispanics don't know how to get online, according to the Washington Times, when we have a person who is out there and, where is it? And Joe Biden is out there, according to Business Insider and the New York Times, saying that black people can't read or write, then I have a big problem trying to believe that Joe Biden is beloved by blacks and Hispanics and he got all their votes. Even as he's telling them they can't read, they're not even smart enough to get a photocopy. I don't know. Maybe it's me. Maybe that's inspiring to someone. I don't think it's inspiring, but they seem to think so. Let me go on. So, Patrick, thank you for that. Patrick also mentions that the poppy fields in Afghanistan were part of the reason why we were in Afghanistan. I would hope to think that's incorrect. I don't know. Garth mentions that the head of the Defense Department is part of Raytheon. He's going to be very rich in the future. Oh, yes, they are. I mean, think about it. We've seen the Middle East is becoming destabilized since literally January 21st. We saw Biden move troops into Syria, which we reported on this channel, and many of the news media said, you don't know what you're talking about, you're wrong. The evidence was clear. We moved troops into Syria and escalated the Middle East. And we had a reversal of the previous administration's point of view, and we suddenly saw more escalation in the Middle East and more destabilizing of the peace, which has led to this point now, where we've had a war with Hamas against Israel. We have seen the North Korea doesn't care about the United States, and they're threatening us right now. We have China that's scolding us, telling us we're children. We have France, Macron, during the G7, scolding Biden, who is walking around lost and doesn't know where he's supposed to be at. And we see everyone, all of the bad guys, all the bad actors in the world are watching this, watching us abandon air bases and give away weapons and funding Hamas. And they're saying, well, there's no limits. It's all open game. My God, we have the same policy that's going on for the Middle East that we do for what we see with the LGBTQ. That there are no limits. That you can see that it's all perfectly fine. Just do whatever you want to do. It's all good. There are no limits. You can go out there and do anything. And one of the things that's really upsetting about that is, and when they count on the public not paying attention, because they count on the fact that when you see the information, when you see the truth, then we get people like Aaron Rupar, who is a journalist for Vox. Vox is a massively far left organization funded by NBC, that they are there to tell you that GOP is evil, and that's all you need to know. And Aaron says Maria Bartiromo today was talking about the January 6th riots, and he says that Maria Bartiromo strongly hints at someone associated with Chuck Schumer shot Ashley Babbitt, the only person that was killed. In fact, one of the few people who were actually harmed, but she was killed by the government. And we've shown the video here before. She wasn't armed. She wasn't doing anything. She was standing, and she got shot by someone unknown. And so he wants us to believe that Maria Bartiromo thinks it's someone who worked for Chuck Schumer. I want you to hear. Now, that's the headline, and 4,000 people have liked this, and 900 people have retweeted this. And I wonder how many people actually played the clip, because I want you to hear this.
That my team reached out to Senator Chuck Schumer's office to check on what he may know about who shot Ashley Babbitt. We have not heard back from Chuck Schumer's office. We did send a note and call. Yeah, what do you think? Do you know who it is, Mr. President?
I wonder why. You know, they talk big, and they're real law and order people when it comes to a certain group, but with another group, they can do whatever they want.
Okay, so that's the full clip. And that is Vox. And they're journalists. This is the left media that is telling you what you just heard. Oh my God, Chuck Schumer, they are so crazy. The right is so crazy that they're blaming the only woman who was shot and killed on January 6th was because of Chuck Schumer. And they don't know what they're talking about. Well, first of all, let's be serious here, folks. Let's think about this. Chuck Schumer, politician from New York, been in office, 40 years? Almost as long as Joe Biden, perennial Democrat. Why would a news media organization ask Chuck Schumer, Senator Chuck Schumer, about January 6th? Maybe because he is the Senate Majority Leader. He is the equivalent of Nancy Pelosi. So if you want answers about investigations that are going on right now, because Democrats have forced an investigation on the January 6th riot, then you would go to one of the leaders of our government, which would be Majority Leader Senator Chuck Schumer. Notice Aaron doesn't tell you, he doesn't tell the public. Chuck Schumer is the Majority Leader of the Senate. That he's a Democrat and he's the leader of the Senate. He doesn't want to tell you that, because then that would actually explain why Maria Bartiromo, a reporter, is asking someone for information, to ask what's going on. She didn't say he did it. She said, do you know what's going on? You heard her herself. And I have to ask you, how many of these people, these 4,000 people, 4,683 people that liked this, the 945 people who retweeted this, and especially the 387 who have, quote, tweets about this, let me ask you, how many of them do you think actually listened to the quote and heard Maria Bartiromo ask Senator Majority Leader Schumer, what's going on? Do you know what happened? Do you know who killed this woman, this unarmed woman that we have video evidence is unarmed? A former member of the Air Force was killed unarmed. Do you know who did that? That's a question. That's not an accusation. That's a question. And you heard the video itself. Aaron Rupar is lying to the public. He literally recontextualized what was actually said so that he could get an advantage for his political agenda, the agenda of Vox, which is supported by NBC financially. They have an agenda and they are lying to you, and they are lying to your face. Garth mentions, did you hear that the song by San Francisco's gay choir? Yes, I did, and it's disturbing. I don't think it's a joke. I don't think it was funny. I don't think when someone says, we're going to come after your children, specifically targeting children, I don't think that's a joke. That's not a joking matter. If someone said, I'm coming after you, in fact, let me be more direct, I've had members of Citizen Action, I've had members of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, I've had members of Antifa threaten me, and I take it seriously. When they tell me they want to see me dead, when they use racial slurs against me, I am very sure that they're dangerous and that they are racist, because I've heard their people say so. And they may turn around, well, that was only a joke. It wasn't serious. It was online. You know what? You said it. It's serious. By the way, I also know that several of the members of the San Francisco gay choir singing a song about coming after your children, which they have phrased as being a joke, are also individuals who have been arrested for child abuse. That is a fact. Some of those members are actually arrested. They're arrested, convicted pedophiles. So when I know that the background of some of these individuals are definitely supporting the very worst idea that this message is saying, I have to say to myself, I take it seriously, because that's not funny. You may say, well, it's just a joke. It's funny, Mike. Maybe. I'm not saying that you can't be gay. I'm not saying that gay people want to be pedophiles. I do say that this is part of a problem. And I do take it seriously because it's a serious matter. And it wasn't something that was on Saturday Night Live. No, that's not how they put it out there. And when people said, that concerns me, their answer is, well, you're just a sexist. I'm sorry, that's not a response to what my concern is. If you're telling me it's a joke, I tell you it's not funny. I tell you that I have a problem because the very same people who are telling me that you're coming after children are the very same people who are telling me that a 5-year-old can decide whether or not they want to be trans and change their body for the rest of their lifetime, and that we are teaching those kids in schools that they are less than human and less than other people, and that they should be gay, because that's what we're teaching them in schools. It's part of the intersectionality. It's part of that gender identity issues that they're pushing in our colleges right now. Then I say, I have a concern. And you say, well, that's just because you're a sexist. You haven't answered my question. You haven't dealt with the concern and the question that it has. To tell me it's a joke doesn't alleviate there's a question here. It doesn't take care of, well, look at the context that I am viewing it from. I don't see it as funny when a 5-year-old is told, make a choice about what sex you're going to be for the rest of your life. And no one can tell you you can't. And no one can stop you, including your very own parents. You can't be stopped, and the parents have no choice. A 5-year-old must make that decision. I'm sorry. I don't see that context as being funny. And then you tell me, hey, and oh, by the way, and we're coming for your kids. I don't see that funny. Not while I watch the very same news media, Vox and others that are on the far left that are telling me, you just don't get it. You're a sexist, racist, even as they lie to our faces with the very evidence inside the document that they are providing to us. As you just heard. He gave us the evidence that he's lying. And you don't have to be a genius to know. Senator Schumer is the majority leader of the Senate. Of course, if you are doing an investigation as a reporter and as a journalist to do your job right, then you're going to ask people in positions of power who are in charge of the investigation, you would ask them for answers. That's not an accusation that they did it or they had someone do it. That's doing your job, asking a question, trying to get an answer that, by the way, Chuck Schumer, majority leader of the Senate, did not provide. He won't tell us who shot this unarmed woman. Which, remember, gun control. We got to get guns out of the hands. It's a health issue. It's a major crisis. By the way, you don't need to know who shot this unarmed woman. Do you understand why I'm upset? And I will say it again and again and again. If you disagree with me, if you think I'm wrong, if you think I've misunderstood the quotes and the information that is available, please leave me the comment, make a phone call, 607-242-1582. But if you do see some value in this, if you do see some interesting information here, like, share, and most of all, please subscribe. Please subscribe so that we can have more people have this conversation, because maybe I want to have this conversation. If I'm misunderstanding this, if this is a great thing, if there's a reason why we shouldn't know who shot Ashley Babbitt, a woman, an unarmed woman, then please, I want to know what that is. I think the world wants to know. If you think that 5-year-olds should decide their bodies for the rest of their lives and use surgery to absolutely inextricably, this is non-reversible, to irreversibly change themselves for the rest of their lifetime without any question from anybody, including their own parents, if you think that's right and you think that's a joke, please let me know. Please, I want to hear that answer. I do know that Mavis mentions you can be funny without coming off as a complete creep. Is speaking about the San Francisco choir, and I agree with that because I do find it creepy. And again, when I look at the context of what else is happening and what we're teaching kids, I'm not seeing this to be funny. I'm not seeing this as a joke. I don't think this is a good thing. And maybe I'm just a crazy old man at 53. I'll accept that. But all the evidence I see from the left is telling me, no, I'm right. And that's problematic. Michael Bowie mentions, meanwhile, Biden's going door to door to see if you've been vaccinated, which is another big issue, which I'm not even going to address today. But yeah, that's a problem. I have a problem with the government going door to door for any reason other than the census. And I don't really even like the census. But why is the government intimidating individuals by coming to your house? And what happens if you tell them, and I want to ask this seriously, what do you think is going to happen? I ask this of everyone watching. Seriously. The government knocked on your door. As Michael is mentioning, as we know that the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration has suggested. They come and they knock on your door. What happens when you say no? What if they ask, have you been vaccinated? You say no. They say, well, come and get vaccinated, or we'll vaccinate you right now. What if you say no? What happens then? Do you go on a list? Are you going to be treated differently? Are they going to force you to be vaccinated? What's going to happen at that moment when the full force of the government has shown up at your door and they are checking off a checklist saying, you said no? What will that government do? A government that is willing to tell us to give power to children to change their lives irreversibly. A government that is willing to fund Hamas, that is willing to fund Iran and increase the net global terror in the world. The same government that is willing to give weapons and aid to the Taliban, individuals that will kill you for the mere reason that you were born in America, regardless of whether you're a progressive or socialist or not. What do you think's going to happen then? And no one is meant to ask this question. No one's meant to phrase it like this. That's why the news media won't phrase it like this. And I want everyone to tell me, what do you think happens when you phrase it like this? When you understand. It's not even phrasing it, it's understanding. This is what has been told to the American people. The Biden administration, because they care about you, because they love you, they're going to come to your door and they're going to check off and they're going to put you on a list of, did you listen to the government? Did you not listen to the government? And what are they going to do? Because they didn't tell you and no one in the news media asked. And what happens if you say, I didn't listen to the government and I'm not going to do it? What happens then? What are they going to do to you? What, do you think they're such benevolent people? Again, if they're so benevolent, why are they funding global terror? As we have seen, that is a fact. Why are they giving arms and weapons to people who would kill you because as a woman, you decided to go to school? That's all they need. That's all the Taliban, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all they need is for you to say, I went to school and you happen to be a woman. That's good enough for them to kill you. And we're funding those people. We are improving the ability of those people to commit global terror. And then you're going to tell me, but it's perfectly fine. They're not going to do anything to you if you say, no, I'm not vaccinated and I won't get vaccinated. Are you kidding me? You trust them? Why? I don't trust that government. I don't trust the government that does that. Garth mentions Chuck Schumer just announced a new program for child funding and no social security numbers needed, and he hoped to extend it. It's only money that's unaccounted for. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Dow mentions, hey Dow, and by the way, Mavis, hello, glad to see you joined us. Dow mentions, from what I understand, they are not using any federal employees but private pro-vaccine activists to do the door-to-door footwork. And to answer your question, Dow, I don't care who they have coming to my door. Because it's ultimately, no matter who shows up, and I guarantee you they're going to have a lot of young people and a lot of women. And they're going to come to the door and they're going to be very unassuming. They're going to be dressed in jeans and they're going to have sneakers on and they're probably going to have baggy clothes and they're going to just be young kids who are not intimidating. And they're going to be there. They're going to be like, hey man, what's up? You know, don't mind me. I'm 420 positive. I'm all into 420. But I got a question for you. Fantastic. That's the kid that's going to show up at your door. Are you scared of him? Absolutely not. And I don't care. The problem is, once that kid's done making that checklist goes to who? It's going to someone in the government. And somewhere in the government, the very same government that under Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez created lists of people who voted for Trump, lists of people who supported Trump. Did you forget that? I didn't. That's what the show is about. We have a very long memory on this show, and if anyone questions it, I have a video on it. I will be happy to show it to you, and I can show you the sources from the left-leaning media and from tweets from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. As she said, we need to make these people accountable, and they made a list. And here is another list, that same government, from the same people who say they want to hold you accountable, that they want to punish you, the same people who are willing to fund our enemies, people who would kill women and children just because they exist. That same group is getting a list now that says you didn't listen to the government. What are they going to do with that list? Why do I have any reason to trust them? Especially when the news media, of which I am a part, deny and do not ask the questions I am asking right now. It would be entirely different if someone said, what are you going to do with the list and the people who say no? And we got a direct, clear, defined answer from the government saying, oh, we don't keep that list. We're going to destroy it. It doesn't matter. No one's going to know, which is a lie. Because someone's going to know. because those kids have to say, well, you got to justify why you're getting paid. They have to show, I spoke to X number of people. Here's all the places of the people I spoke to. Someone will probably go back and verify. Did someone show up at your door today? Did they ask you a question about vaccination? Fantastic. They're going to confirm this because those kids are getting paid. And they have to have a reason for getting paid. So someone in the government is going to get a list. And that list is going to have your name on it. And what are they going to do with that? The same government that under the NSA is spying on you right now. We know that because of the Obama administration. They've already told us that. This is the same government under the Biden-Harris administration that is funding Trump. I've been mentioning it over and over again. It's the same government that's telling you that if you don't agree with them, you are a racist, that you are a problem. If you try and defend yourself because you have a firearm, you are the problem. You. So what do you think they're going to do to you? I'm not being conspiratorial. I just have a big question here. And they aren't answering it. And the news media, like Vox, like I just showed you with Vox, they're lying to you and don't want to tell you. Here it is. Again, Vox, lying as he provides the proof of his lie. So yeah, that really is upsetting. Garth mentions they tattoo you because his answer is they tattoo you if you say no to the people who come to your door because you don't have the new RNA. Oh. Hello, and thank you for calling in to No Soundbites Allowed. I'm Michael. Whom am I speaking to?
Hi, Michael. It's Lacey.
Lacey, my dear. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Not bad. I think we're having a good show.
Yes, you are. I was just thinking because I was looking at the policies at different schools in regards to the vaccinations because I was looking at Binghamton versus Pepperdine, where I'm going this fall. So Pepperdine's a Christian university.
Yes.
And as we know, Binghamton is very left-leaning institution.
Oh,
and
yeah.
what's interesting in the two different policies, and I think this is kind of strange also because they're the most liberal states being New York and California. But Binghamton's exemptions are students who, quote, request and are granted medical or religious exemptions, but very few exceptions, they say. And then Pepperdine in California will give exemptions to medical, religious, or philosophical exemption in good faith. So they're not like Binghamton where they're limiting the number of students, but as long as you have good faith and you decide that the COVID vaccine isn't something that you want to get or something that you're necessarily in tune with based off faith or even philosophy, they're not forcing it.
Well,
I think it's really interesting because Binghamton's not allowing a philosophical exemption.
Well, they are leaving one for race. And Binghamton University has already stated, and New York State has also addressed this, that if you happen to be black and you disagree because you don't have a trust in the government because of the Tuskegee experiments, something that, you know, Joe Biden doesn't remember properly, he thinks it's the Tuskegee Airmen. But because of the Tuskegee experiment, if you are black and you do not get the vaccination, Binghamton University will not force you to do so. They have already said that publicly. New York State is not forcing people because they have said that publicly. So there's a bit of deception in here, and they have different rules for different classes of people. Because I don't know if you knew that. Did you know that?
I did not know that, actually.
A lot of people don't. It came out, I believe it was in December that they had made that announcement. December 2020. And so there is different rules for different people because it's liberalism, socialism. Everyone has different rules. You have a different category and a different checkbox to be in. And we know, and for people who are watching this for the first time, Binghamton University is a school that believes that having 200 racial activists attack 3 people is fair. They believe that it's okay for racist activists like Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow to mob people when they're having a meeting. We've seen that it is a fact. There is evidence of it. There's lots of video. So the rules are very different because if you're white, you don't get a choice. Even if you have a religious reasoning, they don't want you to use it. If you're black, you have to do this, but they're afraid to say, no, we're going to force you. Different rules, different people. It's crazy. I don't know how the left keeps up with all this stuff, you know? And I'm glad that you're going to Pepperdine, by the way.
Thank you. My question also is for these universities is, so if you get your vaccine and if the vaccines supposedly work, then shouldn't you be protected? It just doesn't make any logical sense. Like, why would the next person need to get it if you're technically safe because the vaccine works? So if you want to get it, go ahead. But if you don't want to, then that's your risk. But you should be protected if you decide to get the shot yourself.
Well, that's not true, because if you get the shot, as they are saying, and as all of the pharmaceutical companies have been protected on, you can have adverse effects, which we have seen happen, even amongst the most young, especially the most young. We have seen that you can still get COVID and its variants, in particular the India variant, which is now called the Delta variant. So you can still get COVID. It's just that it may not be as strong. And we know that, well, there's a lot of problems with this. They want you to be vaccinated, but at the same time, it doesn't guarantee anything. And if you don't believe me, ask your local government, ask any of the pharmaceutical companies, ask the place that's giving you the vaccine, is this a guarantee I won't get COVID? And they will tell you directly, no. It doesn't protect you against all the variants. It doesn't protect you about the main variant. It doesn't guarantee anything. But they want you to do it anyway. In fact, they are pushing you to do it. They're willing to buy you off. I mean, think about all the raffles and lotteries that they have put out there saying, hey, you know, you're in a bar. Don't mind if you're drunk. You want to win a lottery? Sure. Here, stab. You just got stuck with COVID. Sure, now you're in the lottery. By the way, do you have any allergies? Could there be any medical side effects? So it's kind of scary, you know?
It's really frightening right now with the entire medical regime, especially just looking at Big Pharma. Because I usually used to think, at least when I was a bit younger, that the left would stand against Big Pharma, and they've come to take such a liking. It's get your COVID vaccine, get it from Pfizer, J&J. And I really thought that they used to just hate these companies and hate the corporations, but now they've just grown so close to them. It's interesting to watch everything kind of flip over the other way.
No, they only hate certain companies. They only hate the companies that help, that don't help their agenda. So when you look at companies like Vox, which Aaron Rupar works for, they're willing to fund them, and they love them. They love NBC, MSNBC. They love Apple. They love Twitter. These are companies that promote what they want. They love those companies, and they're willing to give them more power and more money. And, you know, you look at the vaccines, which are there about fear, absolutely there for the fear of it all, because they don't prevent COVID. They just, for some people, it may or may not make it lesser. And I'm not telling people not to take the vaccine, but I want you to be aware of the realities here. Speak to your own doctor, and you can make your own choice. But they are in favor of companies that do what they want. You never hear the left say, oh, we shouldn't subsidize wind energy, any of the green companies, solar power, even though it doesn't work. Even though we know from Michael Moore, when he produced Planet of the Humans, and he debunked every single thing that the left has said about renewable energy, you won't see them say, oh, we can't give your tax money to these green companies that don't work. So when you hear the left say, oh, we don't like corporations. No, that's a lie. They don't like companies that don't do what they say. It's about control, which I think is even more scary. Do you?
And yes, and I think it's even interesting because the masks have become, I mean, I haven't worn one at all this entire pandemic, which is quite funny, but that's also another form of control, because now they're trying to essentially ostracize the students who decide to not get vaccinated. saying that there's a chance that you might have to wear a mask in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I know myself and other students who will not be getting vaccinated, and that's on our own judgment. We're young, and I don't know about the other people's opinions, but I'm young. I'm willing to not take it. I want to know long-term consequences and long-term effects. So that's my prudent decision. But for those of us who decide not to get vaccinated by our own accord, we're now being told that we might have to wear a mask to essentially kind of ostracize ourselves from everybody, which is really just, they're trying to pressure us once again to go with the status quo. And now you kind of get reprimanded for going against the grain at this point.
Well, it's about doing what you were told. It's not about protecting you. You always have the right. You've always had the right to wear a mask anytime you want. We've seen Asian countries doing that for years. That's part of their culture. They want to. We've always had that right. No one has ever stopped you. But now it's a government mandate. The government is telling you to do something which takes away all of your freedoms, your rights. It violates the pursuit of happiness clause because you don't have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. You have to do what the government says. Otherwise, you're punished. And we know, because we've seen the left media and we've seen Twitter where people have said, I'm wearing the mask because I don't want to be a Republican. You're being ostracized. Do what we say or we will punish you. And that is very different. Again, it goes back to, and let me ask you this. And maybe you know this in schools and colleges and some of your friends. What happens if you say that they come to your door and they ask you if you're vaccinated or not? What do you think is going to happen with that list?
That is a great question in regards to the government or what they're going to do with the data if you refuse it.
No one's ever asked any of those questions, and I'd say any response to that. What do you think? What do people your age think? You're a bit younger than I am.
From what I'm picking up from most people is there's a concern of the government getting a hold of our health records and just no medical privacy going forward. That's what I've heard from most of the concern from pharmaceutical students and whatnot. That's the main one that I've heard, and just a violation of privacy because nobody wants the government knocking on their doors. This is very Orwellian in nature. I don't need somebody coming and saying, hey, did you get your vaccine or not? First off, that's not the government's business. And kind of feels like we've reverted back to, I don't know, before the founding of America, really. It seems like we're being overruled by tyrants once again.
Sounds like China.
Yes, it doesn't feel like we have that freedom at this point. And especially my generation itself, the younger ones, I mean, the millennials as well, but also Gen Z and whatnot, they're very willing to just go with everything that's happening right now because you got to get the vaccine. You see it everywhere, whether it be any social media. I think TikTok's now the big one.
Yeah.
I personally don't have it myself, but that's where there's a lot of this propaganda going around that, well, if you don't get it, then you're going to kill your grandmother or it's your fault that you're spreading the virus. So it's in that order. But I think coming back to that idea of what they're going to do with these lists, I'm concerned about just medical privacy at this point. I mean, oftentimes you hear the word privacy just being thrown around as a right in XYZ, but I think it's really becoming an apparent issue at this moment.
I think so as well. And I think mention to people at Pepperdine, I'll be happy to come to Pepperdine and speak with everyone there live and in person to ask this question. What do you think the government's going to do? And what happens? I mean, I think that's a critical question that is not being asked anywhere. I've looked around. I've searched for it. I don't see anyone in the news media that's saying, and what's going to happen? What happens if you say no? What is the government going to do? And that terrifies me. I think it should terrify everyone, which is part of the reason why social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive, they're really censoring this and not letting people ask this question like we are live talking to the world right now. They're trying to keep it away from people. I think it's terrifying.
Yeah, I think also my question is that we're at the point where if you wanted a vaccine, you could have gotten it. I have other family members who decided to get it, others who decided not to.
Right.
And everybody respects everybody else's decision.
Mm-hmm.
But my question at this point really is, if you didn't get it, you're not going to get it because you could have gotten it already. Maybe a few people will change their minds, but that's not the majority of people. So they're making all these ads now. And I think it's just some famous rappers as well. I think they did a rendition of a song. I can't recall the band right now, but
I don't know rappers, but yes, they did.
Yes, they're doing renditions telling you to get vaccinated. And how is that going to convince anybody? I think that's really what it comes down to. Who's going to be convinced to get a vaccine based off of some billionaire, millionaire sitting in a fancy mansion in New York, California, wherever? Who is going to be convinced that they want a vaccine at that point? Not me. I don't think anybody else who's unvaccinated.
Yeah, and again, we're not, just so YouTube doesn't wipe this out, I want to be very clear. We're telling people, go speak to your doctor, make your personal choice, whatever you want to do. I'm not telling anyone not to. I have family members too, who some of them have gotten it, some haven't. Some businesses are trying to force people to do it, which I don't agree with anyone being forced to, but that's a personal decision. But it's so many degrees of away from American freedom. It's so far from life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It's so far from the Fourth Amendment. There's real issues here. And I have to wonder, we're teaching this to kids now to be subservient. And you've heard me say this before, Lacey, where I've said, our politicians, our political leaders are neo-nobles, and they are ruling over us like we're peasants and serfs. And that's what's being taught to the kids today, those younger than yourself, those who are in, elementary school, high school. This is what they're being taught, and they're also being taught, and if you don't, we're going to punish you. And I have to wonder, what does that lead to in the future? Because I think that's pretty bad. That's a terrifying outcome, and no one's asking that question. Have you ever heard anyone ask that?
No, but I think I also have the question for the education system overall, because right now I'm taking a course in it, and it's going over how we used to have a liberal education, more or less, and it would center around more of the humanities and kind of what you take going forward in life and how to find meaning, find a job, but not necessarily those technician type jobs, like not computer programming. It's more or less reading the philosophers, reading Socrates, different religious texts and whatnot to have that liberal understanding of society around yourself and how to improve. And nowadays we've come focused on specializations, and you need a college degree to even just get a opening job to begin with. You need like 4 years of college experience just to get even to the workforce itself. So it's interesting to see how the education system is also changing. And it doesn't support that traditional conservative mindset where it should be to better yourself, but it's overall now turned towards more or less just finding that job, getting to work, as opposed to looking at the individual and focusing on building them up so they could do more than just be another increase in the GDP overall. I mean, a good economy is obviously necessary, but you also need a good foundation of a society to continue in itself. And I think as we're seeing with America, we're starting to feel some of the effects right now, especially as a culture, which feels like it's falling apart slowly.
And it's infecting other countries like the United Kingdom and France, who are fighting against it. I think that's absolutely true. And I think you can have any economy you want. If you have no society, it doesn't matter. If we pick and choose the laws, like, immigration, we have no immigration laws. We won't apply them to anyone. But we are going to apply laws against conservatives when they do the very same thing that we've seen the progressives do. So if you have an insurrection, which is an autonomous zone, like we've seen in Minneapolis, like we saw in Seattle, Portland, where billions of dollars of damage is done, individuals are killed, that's okay. But if you have a riot down in D.C., that's not okay. And those people are going to be punished, others won't. You could burn down buildings in New York City and in Rochester, and guess what? That's okay. But if I don't get a vaccination, well, now I'm going to get punished. That's not a society. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's also interesting because I feel like this story, it's kind of been going underway, because I know that you mentioned the San Francisco gay choir
Yes.
earlier, but I've been paying attention to what's going on in Hungary right now in regards to, they have new laws coming forth, and it was published in Reuters, and it's saying that youngsters under 18 can't be shown pornographic content or any content that encourages gender change or homosexuality.
I saw that.
Yeah, so you're seeing Hungary take a stance for their conservative culture overall and their education system, and you're seeing the polar opposite in America. And it also gets even more interesting because Hungary's actually, they're facing a lot of pushback from the EU.
Yes, massive.
And Europe overall. And I feel like a lot of people have been just not paying attention to this or to the story. And I think it'll be interesting to watch it play out into Europe itself.
Well, we've seen that several members of the EU have threatened to kick Hungary out of the EU because of that very same policy. And again, Hungary isn't saying you can't be gay, you can't be trans. They're saying if you're under 18, you're not going to be encouraged to do these things. And that's a big deal because it's not saying, oh, we hate these people, we're going to do something against them. It's like, okay, protect the kids. We're protecting the children. That is the job of government, protect the children. And the EU is saying, that's not good enough. It's kind of like Kamala Harris. It's not good enough. They've already won, and the answer is, oh, it's not good enough because Hungary is a very conservative nation. And you go back 10, 20 years, if you were gay, you would be punished, absolutely punished. And now they've gone from saying, oh, we're going to beat you up, kill you, to it's okay, just leave the kids alone. And they're getting punished because it's not good enough. The progressives won, and it's never good enough. I mean, that's the thing I notice about it over and over again is it's not good enough. You give in, and they say, well, we want more. Isn't that BLM right now? BLM saying, it's not enough. You have to do more. And I have to think, that's got to be scary as a young person to see that world and say, where am I going to fit in that? I mean, do you ever have that concern, Lacey? I know you're younger, you're in your 20s. Do you ever have...
Yes. I'm concerned with the culture currently, and especially in regards to the cancel culture. Given that I am conservative and I am outspoken about it, I'm not the most, I'm not necessarily worried, but it does make it a bit more difficult to navigate going into whether it be the business world or really whatever you do. If you're not in a conservative circle necessarily, it's sometimes hard to break through into different pathways going forward, knowing that you could have pushback if you're really vocal, and you have to be a bit more prudent and pay attention to what you want to do with your future, because as of right now, I don't really know which way the culture is going to stir, and maybe it takes a turnaround to the other way, but I kind of doubt that at this point. So I think for a lot of young people, it's especially difficult because there's some people who are really far left for sure, but then there's also a lot of people sitting in the middle right now who just don't care, and for them, they can't say anything, because if they say anything, then it's considered violent. If they stay silent at the same time, it's still violence. So you see this equation of words and violence nowadays. So it's really difficult, I think, for our current generation, because also there's so many options as to what you can do that you don't know what to do. Because some people are telling you go to college, get your degree. Other people are saying go into a vocation.
That's me.
Others say just sit on your phone and make TikToks. I mean, it's interesting to see what's going on, and I think there's almost too many options, where now we just see a society of people my age especially just kind of sitting down, not wanting to do anything with their lives.
I do agree that that's a big concern, and I do support vocational fields, I think, because we have a dearth of them. That is a fact that has been studied. There's numbers on it. It is empirically correct. I know AOC hates that, but it's empirically true. We don't have enough, and we are running out. So that is a good option for some people, and it will be even better an option within 5 years. But I know there's a lot to be concerned about. One of the things I'd say to anyone who's in the middle, anyone who's, and you don't have to be a libertarian, a conservative, a Republican, progressive, socialist, or a Democrat. You don't have to be any of those things. And most people aren't. But you do have to be aware and to be in this conversation and ask questions and try and get answers. Because if you're not, what's happening is by not asking any questions, without expecting any accountability of these neo-nobles that are in charge of our government, what's happening is the kids are getting programmed, which is critical race theory. And in 10 years, those kids are voting. And the only thing they know is do what the government says, or you will be punished, and be racist because the government told me so. And what's going to happen when those kids are in 10 years, you're going to be in your 30s, and you're going to be maybe having kids or having a career. And now you're going to have to deal with, okay, and now if you think things have gone to the left now, imagine when that new generation who's been taught to be a peasant serf subservient to the government, with a government that has been pushing for 10 years to teach people how to be racist and how to become more and more socialist and communist. Imagine that world. That's the scary part. Just because...
Michael,
go ahead.
I've also been thinking lately about how, just kind of looking at it was kind of a paradox in regards to during the whole shutdown.
Yeah.
Because I know myself and many conservatives, libertarians were against the lockdowns. But at the same time, when you think about the education system and parents finally being able to see what's going on in regards to CRT, it's interesting that while we can close down the schools for a bit, parents can see what's going on, but at the same time advocating for the schools to be open. I think it was actually good in some sense that parents were able to see what's going on in the classroom, but it's kind of funny to also want to have the kids back in that environment while standing against it. And I think it's one of the most interesting standpoints right now, because I think you're seeing an uptick in homeschooling especially.
Yes.
But during COVID, they wanted the kids back in school, but at the same time, you don't want them learning that type of material. So I think it's kind of come to a point where we're seeing that we definitely do need reforms in place, because the entire CRT, that's been going on for years. I mean, I've luckily not been experiencing it due to just kind of more the classes that I've chose throughout college, being able to avoid it through going more of a business route and not being subjected to having to hear these radical thoughts. But
that's changing.
Yes, and definitely in younger school districts for sure. I know recently in New Jersey there was a county that voted to get rid of the names of, I think it was Columbus Day or Columbus Day, Christmas break. They voted to get rid of them, and there was so much parent outrage that they had to bring them back and rename the breaks. So I think it's also interesting to point out that we are seeing a lot of the grassroots support and backlash from parents in New Jersey, New York, but also Loudoun County, Virginia. That's really where everything's happening right now, which I'm enjoying watching the parents getting involved right now.
I love that, watching that one gentleman say, "How dare you say I was held back? I'm a doctor." How can you dare say that? The parents at the PTA boards that are saying, it's the First Amendment. Don't you dare silence me. You have to, as long as we're respectful, don't even have to be respectful. As long as we're not breaking the law, you have to hear what we said because we elected you. And that's important. But we are seeing that we have schools who are introducing math as being racist, and that's going into our colleges, that's going into our high schools. I know for a fact it's going to be part of the curriculum. You're seeing that this ideology, institutional racism and teaching of racist policy is being implemented in the sciences where it doesn't belong, because we also have the social democrats like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Anna Presley and Ilhan Omar, who are saying truth isn't important. It's your feelings that are important. And truth can be changed. That's why in math being racist, it's no longer about 2 + 2 = 4. It's now about, how did you get there? Do you understand the racism involved? And that's a fact. Look at the new math, which is all about showing the work. You have to go through this entire process. It's not just 2 + 2 is 4. It's 2 is round up to 5 and all that crap. And they do that so that you understand you have to think the right way so that you can get to an answer we want, whether it's right or wrong, doesn't matter. And that's conditioning. And I don't think enough people talk about that. And definitely not on the college campuses. And I'll say it again. When you get to Pepperdine, I'll be happy. Let me know. I will come to Pepperdine. I'll go to any college. I've been to Rutgers, been to Binghamton University, and I'll be happy to sit down with a group of students. And I want to ask these questions of you guys, like I am with you, Lacey, and say, what do you think? Because I can tell you what my experience has been in seeing and living in Russia and seeing people try and revolt against the very things we're doing right now. I've talked to people in the North Korean woman who escaped into the United States and tells us that our colleges are now more restrictive than in North Korea. We have Chinese activists like Lily Tang Williams, who I've spoken to, who tells us all about what communism actually winds up doing. I'd love to have those conversations.
I would love that, Michael.
Yeah.
And I guess also a question that I have is, when we look at the current culture itself and how news and journalists are putting out news, because I'm writing right now with a few outlets, and when I do my articles, I'm very careful. I make sure to report on the facts, even if I don't like them. But I'm coming to a point where I'm just noticing that a lot of other journalists are just putting in their own thoughts and misrepresenting the facts. So you have to go to the original source.
Mm-hmm. Kind of
And
like,
I wasn't necessarily raised in the environment where I was, where it's more or less more of a center-right community, where we'll make sure to look at different news outlets, be objective thinkers, and not just look at one specific news outlet. If I wasn't raised in that type of culture where I was taught that at a very young age, even in high school, my question is, would I be on the really far left at this point? Would I be on the fringe? And I'm just curious, how do you get that type of thinking out to other students if they don't even have the ability to know about different news outlets? Like, if you're simply reading CNN all the time, how do you know of anything like, I don't know, take The Blaze, maybe, Daily Wire, take some smaller outlet? You'll probably never hear of them, and you'll probably never hear of any ideas on the right.
well,
And I just don't know how you respond to that at this point, because I feel like if it wasn't for the environment I was in, I wouldn't be in my certain how I think philosophically as well at this point.
well, it's a great question. And this is the way I would answer that. And I'm glad you asked me that question, Lacey. And I'm a little different because I'm a little older. And according to the far left, I'm also black, which is another check mark, and I'm Hispanic, that's another check mark, and straight, that's another one. Let's throw those out. My answer is, one, I've always thought about things. I play chess, I play Go, I read books like Art of War, The Five Rings, and it requires thought. Reading Lord of the Rings, not the revision version they're trying to make now and trying to introduce gay characters that didn't exist. No, I mean the original books. And when you start thinking and start envisioning and imagining things, then you're going to, when you read a story, the other thing I would say is, okay, so that's how you start the process for the younger kids. Have them read, have them just use their imagination. And then as they get a little older and they say, oh, I'm reading this, I see this in the news, here it is. Go in. We have, every single one of us has the Library of Alexandria with us. We have a phone. We have the Library of Alexandria in front of us. And when we see this, I would say, go and search an international source. I mean, look at videos that use multiple sources. I use mostly left-leaning sources. I use international sources. I go to The Guardian, Israeli Times, Al Jazeera, The Guardian. I go to Reuters and Associated Press, as well as NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC. And these are some of the sources I use on a regular basis. And when people do that, even if they're not saying The Blaze, notice I didn't mention any right-leaning sources, you will still get an understanding of a centrist and or right-leaning view just by going through and reading all these different sources, and it takes one or two for each issue, and then you'll suddenly say, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. You know, there's a great example, besides the example of Vox, as you were mentioning before, where they're making up their only story. But Vox is also putting on the very clip, which happens to come from Fox News, but the clip is actually refuting the statement being made by Vox. So it's blatantly obvious. All you have to do is pay attention and go, okay, I'm going to actually listen to the clip, not just go by his little headline on Twitter. There's also, look at in Denver, there was a arrest of 4 individuals who had 16 long guns, 1,000 rounds of ammo, and they happen to be black. They're black and Hispanic people. The news media isn't saying that. There's no messenger of that in any of the news media, except the thing is, if you compare that to, say, the shooting of the 2017 baseball shooting, where a Democrat, a radical, crazy Democrat, came out and decided to try and kill a bunch of people because of their political beliefs. They targeted the Republicans directly. Well, you see the same kind of wording, where it's not about race, it's not about their political belief. They've tried to tell us that the shooting in 2017 was a suicide by cop, that no evidence, including from the perpetrator themselves, said that. No, they admitted that this was political. And you see that same kind of wording when you read about from the Colorado Sun, talking about the 4 people who were arrested because of the guns they had, and the fact that one of the individuals went on to social media and said, hey, I'm going to do something. And then they find in that room all the guns and ammo. See, you notice the differences. So to sum that up, introduce imagination and knowledge in reading, and say video games and such that involve reading. Encourage going online with a phone, as simple everyone has, and searching and saying, okay, don't pick the first choice. Pick the one that is maybe from another country or a secondary choice, or go online, and I'm promoting myself a little bit here, but show up at a show that says, hey, guess what? I use multiple sources, not one source, multiple sources. And people will get it because people are smart. I know Joe Biden doesn't think people are smart. He doesn't think people will be able to, if you're black or Hispanic, you won't be able to get online. Kamala Harris doesn't think that if you're black or Hispanic and you live or you're rural, you're not going to be able to figure out how to use a photocopier. But I tend to believe otherwise. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense, because I've been paying attention to that quite a bit. So I've been just kind of curious, because you've seen a lot of bad journalism over the past years. I feel like it's just getting increasingly worse. And I mean, it could go left and right sometimes as well. I've seen news outlets on the right try to switch some of the verbiage on studies and whatnot, when maybe a study was looking at college students and they'll switch it to maybe high school students. And it's just like little phrases like that, which make a big difference. And it could really switch what you're reading. So that's actually good to know, because I see it on both sides, and it's getting frustrating at this point, because I just want objectiveness. That's all I'm asking for in a journalist. And when I see it on the right, I'm especially disappointed, because I've been seeing it increasingly, and they talk about being true in your facts, and to see my own side falling for the left and have both sides doing the same thing, it's really, really frightening.
I agree with you. But hopefully, if we encourage people to diversify a little bit and not be focused in on, well, I have to watch the Fox version of this and only that one, and no one else can tell me. Or I'm only going to watch the CNN version of this and no one else and can't tell me. I disagree, because they're all flawed. I've compared side by side the very same 2 stories, and then I'll go to a third source and find something that neither of the other 2 mentioned. Like when I was talking about just now about the shooting in the arrest in Denver. Well, you have to go through 2 or 3 sources before you find out that this is all because of a maid. It wasn't because of what was online. It wasn't because of the fact that they had the firearms and the police were special, or that it wasn't the red flag laws. It wasn't the SAFE Act. It wasn't any of the gun control laws. Nothing stopped them other than a maid cleaning a room found the guns and called up and said, hey, this looks not good. And that's how they figured it out. It wasn't because of any of the gun control. None of that. All the gun control failed. Red flags, all of that, it all failed. We got to take care of the gun shows. And none of that saved anyone at Coors Field. The thing that saved people at Coors Field was a maid saying, hey, let me call up the police, not a social worker, police, that they actually had police in Denver, which allowed them to send those police out to investigate. And that's why we may have prevented an event. It's that simple. Don't just go with, oh, well, there's only one thing I can do. Because if you were listening to CNN, if you listen to the Biden administration, you listen to Andrew Cuomo, then you think that, well, the red flag law will take care of it. I don't have to worry. They're going to protect me. Oh, the SAFE Act is going to protect me. There's not going to be any more mass shootings. Biden just came down on the gun manufacturers and gun shows and gun dealers, and that's going to protect me, and there'll never be another mass shooting again. If you believe that, and that's all that you read, that maid would never have called the police when she found those guns in Denver, because she would think, well, those laws are going to stop those guys. Those laws will prevent that event from happening, and then people will die. That's the best way I can explain it to people who are saying, I'm in the middle, I'm not sure. Why should I pay attention to, why should I take the extra 5 minutes to read through a separate story? Because if you don't, then when something like what happened in Denver happens, that maid says, oh, well, that law is going to take care of it. They promised me it's going to take care of it. That's what's going to stop it, and I will be safe. And then people wind up dead. I can't think of a better way of convincing people that we need to look at it from a different point of view. I mean, does that sound like it makes sense?
Yes, that makes sense. And also, I have one more question, Michael. This is
sure.
I feel like this is a bit of a loaded question.
I like those.
I might have a few more questions if it doesn't bother you. This is my first one, though. I've been trying to figure out what exactly is causing the conservative movement to be so broken, because it's really frustrating me. Just I feel like a lot of their core values, they don't hold behind them. They don't hold the line on anything. And especially cultural issues, which I used to be really focused on the economic issues. I still am, but I've noticed that I need to take more of a emphasis on following along with the culture. And it's just kind of frustrated me because you're seeing that I don't think that the conservative libertarian coalition is really working out at this point. I think it worked out for some time, but do you think there needs to be a distinction at this point between the conservatives and the libertarians? Because it feels like we morphed them all into a party together, and then we threw in the neocons, we threw in everybody else, and I just don't know what's grounding them together, because the movement, all of the conservatives, it's falling apart. It feels like everybody's infighting. They're not making any progress, and what exactly is causing that? Because I feel like it's not a consensus on political beliefs and the end result of the country and what they want to go for in the future. But I'd be curious to know what you think on that.
It's a very good question. And the simple answer is that it doesn't matter if people are libertarians, conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, socialists. I don't care. None of that matters. That's not the important thing, although a lot of people think it is. And that's been an emphasis in the news media and social media, trying to make people, you have to choose. You have to choose. There is no choice, but you must choose. No. The problem isn't the parties or the fact that they have different points of view. A good friend of mine is Larry Sharpe. He's a libertarian. We have differences on several issues. I know many people who are Democrats. In fact, I know many of the Democratic leaders in my region and across the country. I speak to many senators and to Congress, members of Congress that are not in my party. The thing that actually forms, the thing that's important and the thing that forms my opinion is the fact that I evaluate what are you doing, are you effective, and what's the consequence of the laws you mentioned. I'm not against red flag laws, as an example, something I'm very much against. Red flag laws, I'm not against them because Democrats came up with the idea, because there's a Republican, Marco Rubio, who also is backing that. So the fact that Biden's backing a bill that Marco Rubio is offering in the Senate, by the way, the Senate bill is S-292, if you want to look it up. My problem isn't that it's a Republican issue or that a Republican put it forward or that a Democrat is supporting it or that Andrew Cuomo had put it through. My problem is, what's the law do? What's effective about it? And when I tell people about the effect of that law, and every red flag law in the nation all have the same core problems: destroying due process, taking away the Fourth Amendment, the 15th Amendment, 10th Amendment, 9th Amendment, that it steals your families away, breaks up families. When I start talking about that, people, regardless of what political belief they may have, they all suddenly tell, oh, you know what? That is a problem. That is something I have an issue with. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or not, or socialist or not. Do you want the government to walk into your door at 5 a.m, break down your door, and come in, take your property and take your kids? Because that's what the red flag law allows. And it is a fact. I've talked to the politicians who voted for it. They admit that is in the law. That is a consequence. I'm against that law. I don't care who put it forward. Every single red flag law in the nation allows that to happen. I have a problem with that. So people are focused on, well, that's because you're a conservative. I could care less. It has nothing to do with me being conservative or Republican. It has to do with the law and the consequence. And I can say the same thing about critical race theory. Critical race theory. Why am I against critical race theory? It's not because of the people who are behind it. I don't care if Patrisse Cullors is a self-avowed communist and that she's using the billions that are coming from BLM to buy herself privately 5 houses. I actually don't care about that. You know what I do care about? Is that BLM is helping to promote a culture that says that Black people are by definition inferior, that they are lesser than because of white privilege and because of someone's color of skin. It has nothing to do with people's character. That's where my problem is. I could care less it's coming from the far left. I care about what is the impact, what's the consequence. And that's the thing you don't hear about. You don't hear the public or the news media or the social media saying, and what's the consequence? There's very few of us on social media doing shows like this where we say, and what's the consequence? And this is the problem I have. Yes, I'm a conservative Republican. I'm a Black conservative Republican, Black Hispanic. Does that matter to anyone? Being Black and Hispanic are birthrights. I was born that way. It has nothing to do with who I am. That is not my character. It has nothing to do with what I've read and what I've experienced and when I lived in Russia and I got to watch a coup attempt happen, the earthquake I went through in California. It has nothing to do with my life. Those are birthrights. You know what makes a difference? When I see the consequences of a law and I watch that we are seeing kids being taken away from families because the government said we want to. It has a problem in my life when I see that we're teaching kids in an elementary school to do something that I've experienced. I was in an elementary school in the 70s, and I had someone come up to me, a young man, who was upset because I spoke to his sister in a classroom. They happened to be white. I'm not. And that was a problem. And I went from that in the 1970s to today. You can be in an interracial marriage with interracial children and be elected president. Those are a world of difference. And I have no problem going from the 1970s racism, don't talk to my sister in a classroom, to electing a multiracial president, I have no problem with that. I do have a problem when we decide after that saying, oh, by the way, you're black, you're less than white people because they have privilege because of the color of their skin, and you should be angry about it. I'm sorry, you've just taken a massive jump, a leap backwards, and that consequence isn't positive because I've lived through it. So, do you see what I'm saying? It's not what party you're in. I don't care. What are you voting for? What consequence are you voting for? That's what I care about. Does that make a difference? Does that make that clear?
Yes, that makes it more clear because I don't personally, I don't like a lot of what the GOP is doing. That's why I oftentimes find myself looking for more of an independent perspective. Even though I am conservative, I have to look at the policies because, I mean, the Democrats don't represent my ideal beliefs, but the Republicans aren't necessarily falling into line with that either. So I have to look at it objectively a lot of the time. And while I do vote red, I kind of find myself like falling into that framework where it's like you can't find anybody that's really independent or moderate nowadays that will reflect your views. I mean,
that's because we're not voting for them. We're not voting for them. And that's why I tell people you got to vote in the primaries. Why you have to be in the party and speak up. I get a lot of grief. I get more, believe it or not, I get more attacks from the right than I do from the left overall. I have more hate from my own party locally than I do from the Democrats, and other than Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow and Antifa and those guys who have actually threatened my life. But other than that, within my own party, they give me more grief because I'm willing to say, I don't agree with what you're doing. There's a better way to do it, one that's going to actually have a consequence that's positive. And if we do that, I don't care if you're a Democrat and you're moderate, you're a Republican and conservative, libertarian, I don't care what you are. If you're speaking up, if you're involved in voting and you're involved in saying, hey, that consequence is horrible. Marco Rubio, I think he's a decent guy. I have said on this show, and I've talked to members of Congress and said, you know what? Marco Rubio's bill is garbage. Its consequence is horrible. Tell him to change it. That may not be well liked, but it's the right answer. And if enough people do that, he will change the bill. It will be better, or maybe not exist anymore, either way, but we will get a better outcome with better consequences. The risk is, in between that happening, I'm going to be the one who's going to get some grief. And we've been taught by social media and by the news, you don't want to be the person standing out there by yourself, even if you're not, because I think most people in America agree with you, Lacey, and they agree with me, and they believe we make a difference. But we've been told, but you're by yourself, and we are going to come after you. Guess what? Here I am. I'm 53. I've been doing this for 15 years. And what are they going to do to me? Nothing, because they've done nothing. Don't be afraid to be the one to say, the consequence is bad. Let's make a better consequence. Let's make a better law. Stand up, be heard. It will improve. Be silent, stand back, and do nothing. I guarantee you it gets worse.
Yes, because I oftentimes find myself not in line with Reagan's 11th commandment. So not really calling out any other Republican on your side. As much as I like Reagan and all, I can't come with that statement at this point because there's so much that the party's doing wrong, and that I find myself a majority of the time, I could never vote Democratic because they don't espouse my values at this point. Not like they ever necessarily did a lot of it, but a classical liberal I could fall into line with, and I would support them over an establishment Republican. But you don't really find that nowadays. But
no,
I think it's interesting because I'll be the one who's calling out the party itself, and people are saying to me, "Oh, you're too conservative, or you expect too much out of these politicians." And I'm sitting there, I'm just thinking, well, if they're going to represent us going forward, then maybe they should represent the party. Maybe they should represent the views, and maybe they should actually grow a spine, because I'm not willing to support somebody if they're just going to see the line all the time. And I know the labels have become so important nowadays, the right, left, but they really don't have much of a meaning when the culture just continually shifts left, because I don't even want to classify myself as a Republican because they just don't espouse the conservative beliefs which they used to hold. So I'd rather call myself a conservative, but then that's a convoluted phrase and nobody understands it. And then the classical liberals are kind of just sitting there and nobody represents them anymore. And I just don't know how these labels are holding up, because I know some people are taking concerns with the phrase of rhino, because if you don't do XYZ, or if you try to come up with a bipartisan type of bill, you're a rhino. Or if you do something, it's just you're constantly, nobody can do anything right at this point. And even if we elect them, it's so disappointing with the politicians.
It's because they're so focused on trying to get the right label for the news media to be able to put them in the right box of categories and check it off. That's why we're not getting effective law. I guarantee you, if you have a politician who is doing the right thing, that's paying attention to the consequences, that is trying to pass a law that helps the most people and is based on their constituents' point of view, you could call them anything you want and people will vote for it. And they will do okay. But in this environment where everyone is so hyper terrified of having a label, that then you don't get anything effective happening. I mean, that's the problem. We're so worried about the label. We have to have the right label. The label is leading. Look at entertainment. Black Widow just came out. Black Widow is more worried about having passed the Bechdel test and being able to be saying that they are a feminist movie, kind of like Captain Marvel, that they completely forgot about. How about entertaining people and making a good story with good characters? And they forgot that part because they're busy worried about the label. And that's why Get Woke, Go Broke doesn't work. Batwoman, as a great example, is a show that is so completely obsessed with labels that they have absolutely no idea what a character is. And the ratings suffer for it. People do notice. We need to give up the labels. We need to focus on what it is. Yes, I mentioned I'm a black conservative because people target that and say, well, we have to attack that. I say it because I'm going to stand up and I'm going to be the person that, attack me. And notice, I'm still here. They didn't cancel me. They can't cancel me. So I do it because I want to be a symbol for people and saying, yes, you as an average citizen, just like I am, can survive. It's not that bad. They can't do anything to you. But the average person doesn't have to do that. They just need to be involved.
I even find it funny because I see it on the left and the right. I mean, the left is notorious for constantly playing into identity politics. But I've also been seeing an increasing amount on the right because they're like, oh, don't call me a racist. Blah, blah, blah. We're holding this event for like certain organizations are holding events for Latinos, for example, or
Latinx,
maybe, for Black students, or I don't know, give any type of group, women, and you'll have that. And it's, oh, don't call us racist. Look at us. We did an event for women. We did it for Blacks. We did it for Latinos and XYZ. And it's funny seeing the conservatives saying, but look at us. You're the real racist, but here's what we're doing. Look at what you're doing. And it's just both sides are just as bad as the next. I mean, I'm really becoming more objective now because I'm really starting to see it more. And it's pretty concerning because I don't think that either is better at this point. I think the left's worse, don't get me wrong. But the Republicans are just trying to mimic the same thing. And I don't know if people are catching on. I don't think it's good for them to be playing into this identity politics game. I don't think it's helping us.
Well, that's because people are chasing those labels. And I'd like to believe, maybe I'm wrong, but I think most of the content here on the program is about consequences and the content of what's happening. Yes, it's left-leaning because I see more of the problems there, although we've taken on more than a few Republicans as well when we see the problem there. So it's, again, it's content-driven, it's consequence-driven. And the more that, and you don't see us ever running around going, let's chase that label. Ooh, no, because the labels don't get anything effective done. And that's the biggest thing. Nobody should be chasing a label. It's one thing to say, okay, this is my ideology because that's where I fit. That's where most of my ideas fit. Fantastic. It's one thing to say, hey, I'm going to use my voice to be a symbol so that other people can see as an example, not to be afraid. But the biggest thing is, don't be afraid we're individuals. We're not check boxes. And everyone's afraid to be individuals. America's about individuality. That's why people leave countries that have check boxes. Venezuela, North Korea, China, Russia. Yes, even in England, Canada, they leave those places because they are tired of being check boxes. And that's why they come here, because they can be individuals. I mean, that's the whole reason why we created this nation in the first place. We need to keep emphasizing that. Be the individual, call out the parties, say, yeah, I believe in this ideology, but that doesn't mean I'm blind to everything else. Go for the consequences and make sure you say, I'm after this consequence. Things will improve. That's how we get it to improve. It's not fighting, that checkbox is wrong, we should be in this other checkbox. That doesn't help anyone. If that makes sense.
Yes, and I also, when I look at the conservatives especially.
Well, one thing, I've stayed on, it's been so long since I've seen you, I stayed on it extra long. I've been on for like an hour longer than usual. One more thing, and then I gotta go.
Okay. Yeah, because I pay attention to a lot of the conservative side of things, and I noticed that a lot of the youth are trying to get involved, but I don't think it's genuine. And it tends to be more looking for clout as opposed to the country overall and putting that forward. So I think it's interesting to see this going on with the labels, because they're always looking for who's going to like the post the most and who could say the most outrageous thing next. And it's funny that you say that in regards to just like how you have to either be conservative or this or that, or whether it be left or whatever. And I mean, I'm sure it happens left and right, but especially the conservative community, the young Republicans and young voices, they just don't care about the country. And I genuinely think that, because I just think they want the views online and they're just searching for social media likes. And it hurts me to say it, but I don't think Gen Z has any bit of a conservative voice. I think it's just a counterculture for young people to go along with, and they don't know why, but they'll get a lot of views, they'll get a lot of people commenting, and it's frustrating because I'm the one who has to call out my own side constantly, because conservatives can't do anything right at this point, really. I mean, that's me saying that based off my own, what I've seen along the way, at least.
No, I understand that completely. Like I said, if I was just a institutional Republican, I'd be famous by now. If I wanted to be rich, I'd be a Democrat. That's a fact. I'm well-spoken enough. I'm informed enough. If I really wanted to just go for fame, I'd be a Democrat. If I really wanted to be, or rather, if I wanted to be rich, I'd be a Democrat and I'd have a political office already. If I wanted to be famous, I'd be a Republican that's institutional, and they'd love me for it. I'm not. And you know what? I'm happy with myself. And until people stop chasing those labels, and for the impact and concern for the community, when you start going down the line and saying, hey, I want the best consequence, regardless of my party label, you're going to feel better about yourself, and your community will be better. And, you know, I know this is a concern for a lot of young men, that they're just going to say yes to anything because that's where the girls are. Don't do it. Because it's not, and that's a big driving force that has a lot to do with counterculture, because then you look cool and you're, girls like that, or you think they do, and then that's going to get you attention. No. Just like girls who are on TikTok and they're jumping around, dropping their clothes, that's not going to make you satisfied in your life. Yeah, it'll get you a bunch of likes. It's not going to make you satisfied about yourself. Everything else is short-sighted. Don't worry about the label. be you. Have conversations, disagree with people, stand by what you believe, and you will be satisfied with yourself. And honestly, if you're really doing that, you will see an impact in your community for the better. That's the experience I've had over 50 years. It's not easy, but that's what's going to happen. That's what I believe.
That's true. Thank you for having me on, Michael.
Oh, absolutely. Lacey, you are always welcome on this program. I'll do a Zoom with you at some point. And you know what? I'll come down to work it out. I'll come to Pepperdine and we'll get you on Zoom and all your friends and we'll just sit down and talk.
That would be great, Michael. I'll let you know. I'll keep you updated.
Okay, absolutely.
Have a good one, Michael.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, folks. So we've been on an extended program. Now, one of the things, normally I don't go as long in a phone call as I just did today, but I also don't often get someone who's in their 20s who's able to speak with us to hear their thoughts. And that's what this is about for the show, is hearing your thoughts from anywhere in the world, of any age, of any political belief, to ask questions and to have a conversation. It's not just about what I think, it's about what we think. And to answer some of your questions, because I spend a little more time looking at these things than a lot of people do. And I have been for 15 years. But I hope you like this, and I hope you subscribe. And I hope that going forward, take the opportunity. It's okay to call in. John called in, Lacey called in. And even if you have different ideas and you disagree with me, it's okay to call in and have your comments and say, I don't agree with that 100%. That's fine. Because when we do that, we have a better country. We have a better community. We have a better society. Because we're all involved in this. And we're not all going to agree 100%. And that's okay. But if we don't talk about it, if we don't be involved with each other, then everything falls apart. And you have no further to look for that. Look at what's happening with critical race theory. Is that unifying the nation? No, it's not. Look at our Middle East policy, running away like we are. Is that improving the world? No, it's not. Look at our economy. Is it improving? No, it's not. Nothing's getting better, and we have more and more labels. That's where we need to change. But I hope that you found this to be interesting and informative and worthwhile. I hope you like and share. I seriously hope that you subscribe. And even if you don't, I want you to be back next Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time from anywhere in the world to speak with us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, DLive, and to share your thoughts. Because you matter. You matter a lot. And I really thank you for it because I appreciate you. Thank you, Hot Chicks. And thank you again very much to Lacey to give us such a good insight into the youth in college today. I will come to Pepperdine. And in fact, if you are a youth, if you're someone younger, you want me to come out and speak, I'm more than happy to come to any college. I'll speak in front of any group, including progressives and socialists. I will go to any organization, and I am happy to be able to speak with you about some of the thoughts I have. Whether you agree with me politically or not, I will have that conversation with you guys. So I look forward to speaking to people at Pepperdine. And until the next time, folks, I'm now going to be going off to my little place over to the Belmar to join up with some friends and have a drink and relax. And until the next time, I want you all to be very well.